Good evening. Welcome to KET's special coverage of Election 2022. I'm Renee Shaw. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Kentuckians have been voting for weeks on everything from United States Senator to local offices to 2 constitutional amendments. KET has crews throughout the Commonwealth to bring you the candidates' reactions to the numbers as we get them. We're in Bowling Green at Senator Rand Paul's election headquarters, in Louisville with Charles Booker, another Louisville location with Morgan McGarvey and other Democrats, and at the Republican headquarters in Louisville. We also have analysis from our team of veteran political watchers here in Lexington. Bob Babbage, Kentucky Secretary of State from 1992 to 1996. Journalist Al Cross, Director of the Institute for Rural Journalism and Community Issues at the University of Kentucky. And Trey Grayson, Kentucky Secretary of State from 2004 to 2011. In Louisville, we have Bob Hellringer, a former Republican state representative, and Blair Hayden, Executive Director of Emerge Kentucky. Welcome to all of our guests, both here in Lexington and in Louisville. Thank you all for being here tonight. So let's start with what we do know, and that is, if you're watching at the bottom of your screen, we'll have continuous results at the very bottom and show you full screen results as we go throughout the evening. The Associated Press has called the race for U.S. Senate for Rand Paul. Right now we have a little bit under 24% reporting, Al Cross, so many people may think, isn't that premature? How does the AP arrive at calling the race for Rand Paul so early?
I suspect they're relying on their sample precincts. You know, AP has a very large network of stringers, basically, who get the results straight from the precincts or the county clerk's offices and call them in. And these are bellwether kinds of precincts. They will tell you how a county or even a state may go. And there was never really much doubt about this race. I was sort of surprised when they called it with that many votes still out. But I suspect that's at least one factor they used in making the call.
Troy Grayson, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Al's right, and it's interesting because whenever there's a big race in Kentucky that ends earlier, that you can call early, it becomes one of the first races called in the country. So this is probably the first U.S. Senate race. I think we're all curious about the margin. Senator Paul won by about 15 points 6 years ago over Jim Gray, who was better funded, better known. I expect he'll win by more this time, but it was pretty early. I think it was like 7:02 or something like that.
Yes.
when they issued that call.
Yeah. Bob?
Very early, but we've got different ways now to determine these things, as you know, Renee, from counties that give us an idea of how things are going to go overall, and that's probably how AP could say at this point the race is over.
So when we start, particularly at 8 o'clock time, we always like to tell you what we know. And I know right before we went on air, Al, you were talking about the Franklin Circuit Court race and how that seems to be shaping up. What can you tell us about this between Judge Shepard and Mr. Bilby?
Unofficial returns in the race for Franklin Circuit Judge between incumbent Philip Shepard and Joe Bilby, who's backed by Republicans, have Shepard ahead almost 2-1. Now, some big precincts are still out. But Shepard appears to have won re-election in a race that just had a stupendous amount of money for a race for circuit judge.
Yes, let's talk about that. The amount of money that was in this race, pretty expensive. That's unusual, is it not, Trey Grayson?
It is, and a lot of the money came from outside Franklin County. For those who are watching, Franklin County Circuit is the most important circuit in the state because most of the litigation involving the legislative acts or other state government decisions is in Franklin County, so there's a lot of interest. The Republican legislators have gotten frustrated with some of the rulings of Judge Shepard over the years, and President Stivers actually hosted a fundraiser for Bilby. There was a lot of independent money that came in, running ads and mailers and things like that. Apparently it didn't work very well, or maybe just the race was hopeless to begin with.
You think that was the case? And we did see ads of Mr. Bilby touting himself as a conservative, which there's always a concern about judicial activism, but maybe that didn't matter, perhaps, to Mr. Bilby.
Well, at the heart of it, Frankfort is a Democratic city and Democratic county, and it's performed that way in election after election. So to re-elect one of its own known to be a Democrat judges is not a shocker, but still, with the amount of effort put into it, many people thought it was much closer than this.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Republicans have had a bone to pick with Philip Shepard for a while because of some rulings that he's made. My former colleague Tom Loftus at the Courier-Journal did a story a few years ago that said he's basically ruled almost as much for Republican administrations as Democratic ones. Now, recently, he had been more on Andy Beshear's side when it came to the pandemic, and that, I think, was really the thing that made this a big issue for Republicans because they were very frustrated at their inability to do anything while Beshear was operating under emergency powers. And Shepherd upheld those emergency powers twice, but the second time around he got overruled by the Supreme Court unanimously. And Bilby cited that as the reason for him running. But if you looked at all the ads, that wasn't what they were advertising. They were advertising a sex offender case. And Shepherd and his people come back with reject the lies. And our mailboxes in Frankfort were filled with mailers from both sides. It was really a tough kind of race.
Yeah. So right now we're going to go to Casey Parker Bell, who is at the McGarvey headquarters, and there are some other candidates there tonight. So Casey, how are things there? What can you tell us about the mood and the atmosphere, and who's in the room with you tonight?
Yeah, thanks, Renee. As you said, we're at the Galt House in downtown Louisville, Kentucky for the election night watch party of Louisville mayoral candidate Craig Greenberg and congressional candidate Morgan McGarvey. And the feeling in the room is confident. People here believe that their two Democratic candidates will come out ahead in tonight's election. But Renee, I did speak to a couple of people who believe that the Louisville mayoral's race may have gotten tighter in recent weeks. Greenberg is up against Republican candidate Bill Deariff, who is the current mayor of Jeffersontown, a small community in metro Louisville. And if Deariff were to defeat Greenberg, he would be the first Republican candidate to hold the Louisville mayor's office since 1969. Now, for McGarvey, of course, this would be a big night for Democratic politics at the federal level in Kentucky. He would replace John Yarmouth if he wins, who is the only elected member of Kentucky's federal delegation that is a Democrat. So, Renee, people are confident here. They have smiles, and there's about 200 people in the room, not behind me, but I promise they are facing the other direction. But we'll see how things change as the results continue to roll in. Renee.
We'll take your word for it on the 200 count, but we can hear them in the background. Thank you, Casey Parker Bell. We'll be checking in with you throughout the evening. So let's talk about the Louisville mayor's race that he alluded to with Greg Greenberg and Bill Deariff. So this race has tightened. Many people that I talked to said you might see a Charles Booker sign in the same yard with the Bill Deariff sign. So how was this race kind of breaking toward the end?
Well, the oldest slogan in politics is it's time for a change, and it's still one of the best slogans in politics. And people are unhappy with Mayor Greg Fisher, who was ineligible to run for another term and would have been defeated, I think, if he had run. And Deariff had a fairly clever ad that used the names Craig and Greg, made them almost rhyme, and had them coming out of a copier with their faces alternatively. In other words, he was saying, with Greenberg, you get more of the same. With me, you get a change. And I think that really is what put traction under his campaign. And I think Greenberg also had the image of being somewhat of the elite and not really connecting with voters in the way that mayors of Louisville typically do, at least most recent mayors. So it left an opening there for Deariff, who is very popular in the East End. After all, Jeffersontown is the second largest municipality in Jefferson County. It left an opening for him to build on that base.
I want to go to Louisville, where we've got Bob Hellringer and Blair Hayden joining us, and I want to talk to Bob Hellringer because we talked a lot about this last night, this particular race, Bob. And you said, it was going to be tight, and that Deariff has a lot of support, even from the African American community, Germantown. So talk to us about how competitive it did turn out to be toward the end.
Well, I think that, as the others have said, if we can't win in this kind of environment, with a candidate as high quality as Bill Deariff is, who came right out of central casting. I mean, it's like a mirage, a miracle that occurred in the grotto at Lourdes for Republicans. I mean, he's running the second largest city in our county and doing it very well. He's very popular, very competent. He's not ideological, really. He wants to do a good job. And Louisville would be so lucky to have him. I mean, we just need a complete change from the last generation of leadership in Louisville to move us ahead in the future. And I think enough people are going to realize that, who normally wouldn't vote for Republican, wouldn't even think about it, are going to say, no, it's time for something radically different in this community. And we're going to go out and vote for Republicans. We may vote for Morgan McGarvey and Tina Ward Pugh and all those kind of folks, but we're going to vote for a change at the top just for change's sake.
Yes. Anyone else want to comment on that
Over here.
Louisville mayor's race?
Okay.
In recent, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I think Craig ran a kind of a traditional progressive candidate race, and especially with the fatigue factor and the crime issue in Louisville, might not have been the right kind of campaign to run. I mean, I think Al mentioned, Craig's father was a prominent business leader. Greg Fisher's father was a prominent business leader. Craig's never run for office before, or if he has run for office, it's been a long time. He may have run for something a while ago, but he's not been elected the way Deroff has. The other thing that happened, I think, is that there were several contested state house races, and one of the things from Republicans told me in Louisville was having a very competitive race from Deroff, well-funded, well-organized, has allowed all the legislative races to kind of all work together. There's even some talk of trying to pick up a couple Metro Council seats. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, but it was a good coordinated effort with a good candidate, as Bob noted.
Bob Babbage?
A couple of tough years in Louisville, as we've all followed. It's still our star city in terms of economy and what it means to the state. In a recent poll, Renee, that was shared with us, the approval rating for the current mayor was 22%. That tied to the comments Al made about connecting one administration to a potential next administration, did weigh into the equation. And also, I agree totally with Trey Grayson. Crime in Louisville or any place in Kentucky, with the increases and the disturbing things we've seen, has caused a great deal of angst and difficulty with voters across the board.
So right now, we are preparing. U.S. Senator Rand Paul is about to take the stage. We understand that Democratic nominee Charles Booker is also going to be approaching the stage. So right now, here is U.S. Senator-elect for a third term, Rand Paul.
What a great crowd. In this hour of our victory, as a red wave sweeps across the country, and America chooses a different direction, we need to remember that we don't come together to celebrate the concentration of power. We come together to rejoice in the dissipation of power. We come together to reaffirm that we are the party of the 10th Amendment, that the powers not explicitly given to the federal government are left and kept and retained by us, the states and the people. We come together under the belief that government is instituted among men and women to preserve our God-given freedom, period. Our desire is not to rule over others, but to largely leave people alone. It is this system of constitutional checks on power that has allowed America to become the freest nation ever known. With freedom has come great prosperity, but we do not choose freedom because it makes us rich. We choose freedom because it's a part of our very nature. America is not only the richest country in the world, but we are also the most generous. Private charity in America is unrivaled worldwide. Why? Because we truly believe we are our brother's keeper. It is my hope that as our nation moves forward, the anger, the vitriol, and even the death threats will abate.
Yes.
Surely there is common cause in the concept that a limited constitutional government allows people from all walks of life to live peacefully together as long as they don't commit aggression against others. Surely the concept of local rule can allow cities and states to express their social mores in a varied fashion. The genius of federalism is that while we are bound together as one nation, we are still free to express ourselves and our significant differences state by state and city by city. Liberty, or the absence of government intrusion, should allow people of widely differing beliefs to live together, each according to their own beliefs. To preserve this liberty, we must especially defend the freedoms that our founding fathers thought important enough to put right up front in the Bill of Rights: the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom to associate with whomever we please. While the First Amendment doesn't prohibit private censorship, our founding fathers did prize free speech. One can only imagine our founders' reaction to the government actively engaged with private enterprise to censor speech. To protect free speech, Congress must, absolutely must, prohibit government collusion with big tech. If America cares enough about protecting free speech, Americans should reject, and if need be, boycott companies that censor our speech. Truth, whether it be scientific or political, can only be determined by disputation, by argumentation, by convincing others, by voluntary acceptance. But the greatest originator of misinformation is the U.S. government. The greatest disseminator of misinformation cannot be the arbiter of truth. Both left and right need to wake up and acknowledge that government should never be allowed to create any entity that even remotely resembles a ministry of truth.
And so you just heard U.S. Senator-elect, U.S. Senator Rand Paul. He's been elected to a third term, giving his victory speech. We are efforting to also have a speech from Charles Booker. He is in the room now, and I do believe he is speaking to those in the audience, and we will bring that to you momentarily. Let's just talk about briefly what we just heard, and all of these speeches will be on our website in their entirety tomorrow at KET.org, so you won't miss a thing. What did you hear that stuck out to you, Trey Grayson?
Well, he was giving a very national address. He's speaking like somebody who, if the Republicans take over the United States Senate, he'll chair the Senate Health Committee. Actually, the very first thing he said, I don't know how well it came across, because it was like right as we're cutting in, where he said, "Welcome to Dr. Fauci's retirement party." He's going to clearly have Dr. Fauci in his crosshairs, and he's going to clearly have the Biden administration in his crosshairs. So in some respects, he was previewing what he would do if he were able to take over that Senate Health Committee.
Yeah. Something to watch out for. Al Cross, what did you take away?
I do think it was a national message. This is a guy who ran for president once. You run for president once and you get the bug. It was Donald Trump who ended Rand Paul's campaign. Paul had about 12% in the polls. When Trump got in, he dropped to 6%. And he stole about half of Paul's base. And it's that element of the electorate, which Trump has now amplified, that says, "Leave me alone," just like Paul said in his speech, that libertarian kind of message. So he's back on the national stage again.
Do you think he might run for president in 2024, Rand Paul? Well,
who knows? The Republican primary or caucus situation is so dependent upon the fate of Trump, we really don't know. But let's say that Trump somehow became disqualified. I think there would be room for any number of people to run. It's not just Ron DeSantis that can claim the Trump mantle.
And so November 15th, we'll hear, right? The big announcement is coming from former President Donald Trump. Bob Babbage.
Yes, Rand Paul has a connection that is unique and a brand that is strong, built very authentically and very effectively. He went into this election with a terrific approval rating compared to others around the country, and kept it, funded it tremendously, and organized it very carefully in a very hands-on way.
So in our Louisville studio, Bob Hellringer and Blair Hayden, I want to get you all's take on the U.S. Senate race. I want to ask you, Blair, because we haven't heard from you yet this evening. We understand that Charles Booker is in the room. He has given or is still giving his remarks now. Talk about what his political future could look like.
Hi, Renee. Thank you so much. I'm excited to hear Charles's speech and his message to the people. I think Charles has a bright future ahead. Of course, he did a terrific job serving as state representative, and he has really engaged Kentuckians from every area of this state. I've seen Charles signs in counties that are very red, and he has really woke voters up. And I know that his fight is not finished, and I think we can expect to see a lot more from Charles in the future.
So many people will speculate that this really wasn't about him becoming the next junior senator from Kentucky anyway, that perhaps this opens up a path for him to have some presence on the national Democratic Party stage. Do you buy that?
I'm not sure, Renee. I think that it would be great to see him go for something like that. And I think the most important thing is that he's really engaged folks that weren't engaged before. And we've got younger Kentuckians and Kentuckians from different areas that we now see participate. And that's what we need more of.
Well, last night, Blair, to that point, we talked about this on Kentucky Tonight, about the shallowness of the Democratic Party bench when it comes to recruiting talent to run either for congressional races, these federal races, or even state legislative races. So the question being, what can the Democratic Party do to change course to recruit younger talent that could present formidable challenges to these Republican incumbents?
I heard that conversation last night, Renee. I think that Democrats are really doing a better job to engage voters and to people who have never voted before. I think we are building a bench. Obviously, I'm going to say Emerge is building a bench, and we have much more involvement from younger folks, especially women, and we need to see more women at the table. We have 58 women on the ballot today, and many of them are from the New American Majority, and that is a large percentage of younger folks running for local offices, and some of them who are incumbents for local offices now running for the Kentucky General Assembly, judge, and I do think that you're starting to see Democrats build the bench in a way that we haven't done before.
So to your seatmate there in Louisville, Bob Hellringer, who was a part of that discussion, and you made the point last night about, you know, the candidate that Charles Booker is and just wasn't the right fit for Kentucky. Too progressive, too liberal platform, just too left-leaning. Not that you're in the business of giving the Democrats advice on what they should be doing, but what would you say to them about how to put you on the hot seat? We didn't ask you that question.
I give them advice all the time. Yeah.
They just don't take it, right?
No, why should they? No, I've been telling them for about 15 years, they ought to run Senator Robin Webb for governor, Congress, United States Senate. She was my seatmate in the House, and I think the world of her. She's a very moderate Democrat, pro-gun. I mean, so many things that appeal to so many people in the electorate in Kentucky. And every time I do that, I'm going to get in trouble now because Robin will call me on the way home and thank me for profusely for this again. But there are people like that dwindling, but someone like that I think would be very attractive to a statewide electorate. And they go for Charles Booker. I mean, I don't get it. That was never going to work. This is his second consecutive race for the United States Senate. He didn't make it out of the primary last time. He did this time. And I know Charles. He's a nice gentleman, a nice family man. I think maybe Gerald Neal's Senate seat eventually. Not now, Gerald. Don't want to hear from you. But Gerald is at least gaining on me in age. and if he hasn't already overtaken me. And I think, that'd be a good spot for Charles. Yeah. I think he would serve well in the legislature. He did one term in the House, and I think his future is bright, but it's local in Jefferson County.
Well, many people said that he should have considered a run for mayor. Bob, and I'll go to you, Al.
Congress.
Or Congress, right.
If McGarvey hadn't gotten the nod from Yarmouth.
To your point about Booker taking a role nationally in the Democratic Party, that's a possibility. Booker reminded me a bit of Beto O'Rourke, also Stacey Abrams. They had magic moments in the last 2 or 3 years that look like might stick around. That kind of feeling and edge that gives you an advantage in an election. He turned too quickly into this one. It was not going to work without magic back, and the magic didn't happen. So the next one needs to be a careful consideration for him. He definitely has a strong brand. He raised $8 million, not anything shabby, but a third of what Rand Paul raised, or less.
At the end of the day, like the jurisdiction matters. You can be the best, most energetic, fire people up, but let's face it, since the 1992 Wendell Ford race was the last time a Democrat has won a U.S. Senate race. Now, we've obviously elected a lot of Democratic governors in the interim, but as federal races become more and more nationalized, as Kentucky becomes more and more conservative and more Republican in its outcome, it's very hard. And for a progressive candidate like Booker, even one with a lot of charisma like him, but he didn't have a chance. This is probably not the right race for him to win. Now, maybe it's a race that it was a tryout for something different, but there were other opportunities this year that he could have, in hindsight, maybe been a better candidate for.
Yeah, Al Cross.
I'd like to circle back to what Blair said about her recruitment and ask her if she's available. How many of those 58 are on the ballot in rural districts? Probably not very many.
Blair Hayden, did you hear Al Cross's question? He asked, because you talked about 58 of the Emerge women. How many of those are in rural areas?
I don't have that percentage right now, Al, but I will have it for you in a few minutes. And we do have, I'm gonna take a guess at around 15% of those 58 are in rural areas.
Okay, that's about what I figured, because the Democratic Party just is not inspiring people who are inclined to be interested in politics to get really engaged and involved in politics in rural areas, because they don't hear enough talk like they think. The state has moved to the right culturally, and that is reflective of its rural nature. So when you go into towns like Danville, Madisonville, Henderson, Princeton, and so on, those are places where Democrats used to do pretty well. Not so much anymore. And you've got to have local people who are willing to stand up and define themselves in the way that Robin Webb, which is a great example used by Bob Hellringer, has done. She's a pro-gun, anti-abortion Democrat. That's the kind of Democrat that gets elected in rural Kentucky.
Yeah. Bob Hellringer, were you going to add something?
Can I jump in here a minute?
Sure. Go ahead.
Let me add, because I don't think Blair... have you had much experience with Al Cross? See, he knew the answer to that question. Okay, now that was his opportunity to weigh in with his answer. Okay, he already knew that. Al, I can happily tell you that we've already moved in. We, being the Republicans, have moved into all of those communities you just mentioned. We also have a strong outreach to Republican women called Kentucky Strong. Julie Rocky Adams had a lot to do with that, Senator Adams. And we have women like Rebecca Raymer in Muhlenberg County, Marianne Proctor. These are all people who are going to win tonight. Marianne Proctor, going to take South Santoral's place. Amanda Bledsoe, going to take Alice Forgy Kerr's Senate seat. Carrie Sanders McKeon, okay, that's a long shot. But Susan Witten here in Louisville has got a great shot. Candy Mazzaroni in Nelson County. Amy Neighbors in Monroe County, or as they say down there, Monroe County. We've got Shelley Fromeyer. Yeah, there you go. Monroe. Well,
you can't say
I served with Richard Turner. That's the way Richard pronounced it, Monroe.
Well, he was from Bucktussle.
And We'll tell some Richard Turner stories later on tonight. Depends on how long we go here. But anyway, we're and a lot of our graduates from Kentucky Strong are serving in office. Representative Deanna Frazier, Representative Kim Banta, Representative Kim Moser. We give a discount for women named Kim. But anyway, we're doing a great job.
Now let me get the last word in.
There you go. Of course.
Emerge makes it a point to recruit in these rural areas, and in fact, I do a tour around every summer. And we have a Barron County attorney that's up for re-election tonight, first woman to serve in Barron County, Catherine Thomas. We have a state house representative, a state house candidate in Henderson, Velvet Dowdy. We have a woman running in Breathitt County, a couple women in McCracken, and we've had mayor, of course, on the local level, lots of women out there. And I'll have to say, I didn't know Kentucky Strong was even around anymore, Bob.
Oh, no, they're busy. They're quiet. They're quiet. They're strong, but quiet, like women. Strong, but quiet.
All right.
Some women.
So right now, we want to play for you the concession speech of Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate, Charles Booker. Here's what he had to say moments ago.
What's going on, Kentucky? All right, so I know y'all been partying. I've been listening to y'all downstairs. We watching the results come in, and the numbers are still coming in, but I wanted to come before you right now because I know y'all have heard the news that they've called the race prematurely. Look, we understand how this goes. They look at these races based on analytics. They make projections based on previous election cycles. This is not like the status quo. So we're going to do our diligence and continue to monitor the results coming in. They still got to report Lexington. They haven't reported all of Louisville. We've done so much work in rural parts of Kentucky. And look, their assessment is based on the premise that a black man can't get support in rural areas. So, as soon as a few numbers come in that start trending for my opponent, they're like ready to just call it a wrap. Okay, we understand that. I wanted to tell you all this, and I needed to tell you right now. We love you, Charles Booker. You already knew it. This is not about running for office for me. It was about standing for my family. And listen, y'all my family. I was taught you fight for family. And it is my privilege to represent you and to stand beside you, to lift you up, to lean on you and hopefully encourage you. Yes! I know that Kentucky deserves better. I know we deserve better. And I want to thank every single one of you, every volunteer, all of my team, because look, we only got this space until 9. So we're going to be watching the results into the night, but I couldn't let this moment pass without thanking every single one of you. And all my cousins, my aunties, my uncles, squirrels in the building. all my frat brothers, all my fellow good troublemakers, everyone all across Kentucky. I am proud of us. I'm proud of us. Because we didn't give in to the naysayers and the doubters. We stood up. We determined we were going to fight anyhow, because that's what Kentucky is all about.
All right, so that was really, I characterized it as a concession speech, but it was a non-concession concession speech, really, because you heard nominee Booker there say that this is not like the status quo, that they will continue to monitor the results coming in. He said that the calculations are based on the premise that a black man can't get rural votes. And so
he played a little political jujitsu here. He takes this early call and uses it as an opportunity to make the case for his campaign while the people in the crowd still have a little bit of, well, they're not really down.
Right.
You know, they haven't been told for certain that they've lost. So I think it was, Charles Booker has pretty good political sense about him. I think he does well on his feet.
You don't have to concede. I mean, there's no law that requires that. It doesn't matter. In fact, it doesn't matter whether you concede. If you can concede and you're actually, when we certify the votes, you win, it's meaningless. But again, as we talked about earlier, this was a very, very uphill battle. And as more votes are being counted across the state, it's the rural voters are going to not vote for a Democrat; they're going to vote for a Republican. That's why they called the race. And I'm interested to see what Booker does, because he does, as Al said, he's got a lot of talent. He did a masterful job, I think, of messaging tonight to his folks, but he's to the people in the crowd. But he's got to pick the right race.
Yeah.
He created a positive moment there in a moment of loss. It's not going to change any way in any big move for the rest of the night. But he gave people a sense of optimism. He recognized their differences and the differentiator that he tried to bring to the Democratic Party in the race. He is having his party for Booker only, and there's another Democrat party for other candidates tonight. It does show some sense of a disconnect or a split that we'll all keep an eye on, just to see how Louisville comes back together, and the state party as well.
When he had that tweet where he referenced sort of trying to overcome or not getting help from the Democratic Party. But yeah, this night's tough. I mean, Bob and I have given these concession speeches in these statewide races before. It's not the highlight of your political career to give this speech. And but you're there with your most fervent supporters. You're there with your family. But it's tough. Losing's hard. Even if you were supposed to lose, even if that's what all the predictions were, it's still hard.
And this is a general election concession too. It's not like the primary speeches that you all had to give. I think Bob raises an interesting point about.
Dissect that a little bit. Marinate on that a little bit.
Actually, no. Bob makes an important distinction, and that's true.
Bob's point about the lack of connection is important for next year. Because Andy Beshear can't afford to have Charles Booker grousing around about him in Louisville.
True.
Yeah.
Bevin had a problem like this, you remember, with an independent candidate who took 20,000 plus votes in that 2019 race, which you could argue cost him the margin if he could have pulled those in. That's what you're looking at in these very close races around the country, how you keep the edges pulled into the center and the momentum for your party.
So I just got a text, I hope I can say this publicly, from Senate President Robert Stivers. Jay Williams wins. This is Senate District 20, I believe.
Yeah, and that's what I got a text from Damon Thayer saying the same thing.
Yeah, so this is the redistricted, this was...
Al and I live in this district.
Right. So tell us about this, that has Teresa Barton, the Democrat Franklin Judge Executive, one time. She worked for the Fletcher administration. Jay Williams had been in both the House and the state Senate.
So Jay Williams was an elected Republican back in the 90s and was one of the very first Republicans to run sophisticated campaigns with targeting voters. He ultimately lost the 98 congressional primary for the 4th Congressional District to Ken Lucas. He won the primary, lost in the general. And I think he ran one other time, maybe for a state rep race, but has been kind of absent for the last 20 years. Teresa Barton was a rising star in the Democratic Party in the 90s, early 2000s. Took a job, as you said, with the Fletcher administration. She, too, has been out of politics for a long time. This district is Franklin County, Owen County, Gallatin County, a little bit of Boone County, and a little bit of Kenton County. My part of Boone County, Richwood, I'm in this precinct, so I got bombarded with mail from both candidates.
And so the Republican Party, if you look at the credit lines on these mailers, it's paid for by the Republican Party of Kentucky in most cases.
Yeah, and so Jay, when he was in office, was a social conservative. This particular messaging was all about taxes, crime, inflation. Barton tried to run. She actually said she wanted to cut taxes too. She was trying to run as a moderate in the race. And it was it's a new district because of redistricting. Some of this used to be Senator Thayer's district. Some of it used to be Senator Southworth's district and a little bit of Senator Schickel. So we weren't really sure what to expect. And it was 40-something% Franklin, and which Barton would do well in, and Williams would do well in the rest. And so what we're hearing from President Stivers and Leader Thayer is correct, which I'm sure they wouldn't tell us this. They wouldn't set us up to talk about this race if it weren't accurate, is that, she got a big lead in Frankfort, but Williams
enough.
was able to pull it out in the rest of the district.
So the conversation we had last night, though, that there's not everyone in the Republican Party is happy, perhaps, about the fact that he was victorious tonight, because he may be in the same line of philosophy as an Adrian Southworth. And
yeah, he was a little bit of a, well, I mean, again, that primary back in '98 was to succeed Jim Bunning when Senator Bunning went from Congress to the United States Senate. Williams beat Rick Robinson, who was a top advisor to Bunning, and there was a split inside the Republican Party. Back then, it was more social conservative, you know, country club establishment Republicans, whatever we want to call people like me. And so there's still some hard feelings from that race from 20 years ago. I know some people who didn't like Jay Williams back then and didn't like him now, and were maybe quietly helping Barton out. So interestingly, Governor Fletcher actually gave a contribution to, I don't know that that was so much an anti-Jay Williams so much as a pro-Barton. Right. But that was interesting because he knew when he did that, that was going to be noteworthy.
And he had employed her.
He had employed her.
Right,
She worked
right.
in the administration. Her husband had worked in the administration. Even though that was 15 plus years ago, he felt loyalty to her and was willing to cross party lines to support her.
I think Jay Williams made a good candidate. He knocked on my door. I don't think he knew whose house it was. He was just working the precinct.
Oh, come on. He knew. I guarantee you, Jay Williams knew he was knocking on your door, and he probably brought a smile to his face.
You're probably right. But he made out like he did.
Yeah.
But he meets well. You know,
Yeah.
he's engaging.
personable.
You know, he makes a good candidate. And all these hard ideological edges that he had 20 years ago have kind of faded. Actually, his ideology of those days is closer to the mainstream today.
Yeah.
Bob Hellringer, you want to comment? You know Jay Williams very well.
Yeah, Jay's an old house buddy, colleague from way back, and we love to see these guys like Tom Odell Smith. It gives me hope that I could run for dog catcher again or something. But Jay, you know, y'all are missing a little point here about Jay. Yeah, he was a little bit of a maverick even for back then, but we were in the minority back then, okay? That was our job, was to lob hand grenades and to try to upset the express train roaring through the House floor every day. And Jay did that job well. I mean, he's going to a super majority. And I think Jay will be a team player. I think he'll be an excellent senator. And I don't think, you know, Damon and particularly Damon and Robert would be saying these nice things about him if he's going to come up there and be another Adrian Southworth. Okay, so I think Jay will be a welcome addition to the Senate caucus.
Well, do you think he's going to second Adrian Southworth's motions on the Senate floor?
Oh, well. No.
Not after the Republican
really
Party
don't.
of Kentucky
I
put that kind of money behind his campaign, I would think.
I don't know anybody that's going to second those motions and live to tell about it. You know, I mean, Damon's got a very good. They drag the Kentucky River daily around 4 o'clock of every afternoon session to see who has lately gone into the drink, who might have even looked favorably on seconding a motion of Senator Southworth. So that's not going to happen in my lifetime, okay?
All right.
I don't think.
This is the one state Senate seat the Democrats thought they could pick up.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that now 31, it widens that
Right, because
super duper
the
majority.
Parrott seat, the Democrats didn't
Field
a
a
candidate.
candidate there.
Yeah.
So let's talk real quickly to make a pivot here to Kentucky Secretary of State, yet another one, but the current one at this point. Michael Adams, thank you for hanging in there with us for a few minutes. Wanted just to ask you some questions about, have you heard anything irregular happening? How's the day gone? We know that more than 300,000 Kentuckians voted early, so talk to us a little bit about how that's gone.
Well, it's nice to know I've got a job lined up for when my term ends. I can come on KET for election night. I'm really pleased that we've had what appears to be a very smooth election. Certainly the turnout's been a lot higher than really any of us saw coming. We thought initially that the interest level was somewhat low, that the races weren't especially competitive, and we'd probably have a low turnout, but we've not seen that. I think we're on track for a 50% turnout, which would be the highest since at least 2010 or 2006, maybe the highest since 1990. We're still counting votes, so we don't know. But I just spoke to the Davis County clerk, and she's over 50. And that's actually typically a somewhat low turnout county because they're in the Evansville market. They don't get a lot of Kentucky political news there. So if they're at 50 in Davis, they're going to be at 50 plus everywhere.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to stump over your lead there about 50% turnout in a midterm election that maybe haven't had that kind of turnout since the 90s. You haven't heard any kind of complaints about intimidation or harassment. We know that that's been a concern across the nation with poll workers. You yourself have talked to me about how you've had, 9 county clerks, 23 in total, that decided not to run for re-election because of harassment and intimidation. None of that's happened in the last few days, to your knowledge, or what do you know about that?
No, we've seen really none of that. None of the complaints that got phoned into our office or the AG's office or the State Board of Elections office, they were all nickel and dime things. Nothing at that level, certainly. It was a smooth, quiet election, just really high turnout. And I'm really proud that we had such a high turnout because this really puts the lie to all these false claims about suppression and about vote fraud and all of this stuff, the machines being rigged. This was a vote of confidence in our system by Kentuckians.
Yeah. Anything else you care to talk about? Since Republicans may have a good night, we don't know. I mean, U.S. Senator Rand Paul was reelected, but that was a foregone conclusion, and the Kentucky Senate's picked up 1. I mean, what are your optimisms about the night, maybe even nationwide, for the Republican Party?
Well, I won't speak to the party, but I will give 2 points of optimism. Number one, voters of both parties utilized early voting by a large number on each side. In some states, and actually to some extent here, some people think that voting early is a Democrat thing to do. That's just not true. Voting is voting. How you do it is really not political. It's not partisan. And so I was really relieved as a Republican who supported voting, that Republicans came out and early voted, and so did Democrats. We're 45% Democrat, 45% Republican, and that was about what the margin was in the early voting. So I'm really pleased to see both parties benefiting and using the early voting. That's my first takeaway. The second is what we saw was a big utilization of early voting, but also big crowds today. We had several counties that had lines for an hour, 2 hours at one point. We had a few counties that still had folks in line at 6 o'clock when the polls closed. I think when we look at election reform and making voting easier, we need to focus on Election Day. So my team and I are going to be looking at how we can improve Election Day itself. I fully support the early voting days. I'm glad we've got them. But I don't think that we're going to have a solution by just adding more days. I think the solution is to add more locations on Election Day itself.
So I wanted to pick up on that point real quickly before we let you go, because we know during the pandemic there were more opportunities for early voting. Many people would say that they waited in long lines the last 3 days to vote early. And so I want you to respond to that. And then also, what would be your Election Day reform ideas? Would it be longer polling hours, or what would your ideas be that you might posit to the General Assembly?
It's great to say longer hours. I support that in principle. The problem is, how do you find people who will work an even longer day than we're working now? We're exhausted. We've had 3 days of early voting. We were all at our office at 6 o'clock this morning running this election. I'm still not done. The clerks and the poll workers, we're all working really hard. I don't know that I'm going to be able to find 15,000 people that'll work a 13-hour day instead of a 12-hour day. It's hard enough as it is to find volunteers. So my view is what we need to do is improve the locations. I do think that we had some counties that over reduced their location number. We had, especially today, some large counties with therefore a large number of voters, and especially more red counties, which are more likely to want to vote on Tuesday instead of voting early. And they're the ones that had the longest lines and where we got some complaints. And so I think we need to revisit the process where we're letting counties, in my view, over-reduce the number of locations. I think we need to have a legislative fix for that.
Trey Grayson has a question for you, Secretary Adams.
Well, I just want to point out, one of the other challenges we have, and that he and the clerks and everybody else had this year, is it's just a really long ballot. Every 8 years, you have every circuit judge and every district judge, and unfortunately, in the larger counties, Secretary Adams, as you know, that's a much longer ballot. Kenton County, up in my neck of the woods, which I think is the one you were alluding to, that had pretty long lines, had a lot of circuit, district, and family court judges running. on top of a really long amendment. And so, you know, maybe the Supreme Court, we can thank them for the long amendment language.
Because of Marcy's Law, right?
Because of Marcy's Law, and that's striking out. So now you have to have the exact language. And it took people a long time to read through Amendment 1. So this election had some unique challenges, but I think the Secretary is onto something. We got to have that right balance between early and Election Day.
Go ahead, Bob.
Some of the other secretaries of state around the country in office or running for office who've been pretty far out on the edge. I want to comment and compliment Secretary Adams for a very rational, smart, sensible, consistent administration of elections. He's done a stellar job.
Easy to vote, hard to
I can't
cheat.
disagree with that at all. You know, I've said in print he's an example to the nation, and he is.
See, that's how come Secretary Adams agrees to come on, because at the end of it, you get all these accolades, right? From Al Cross and two previous secretaries.
Third best secretary.
That's why I'm a primary challenger, guys. You're killing me.
Well, thank you, Secretary Adams, for taking time out of your very busy schedule and your long day to speak with us. We appreciate it. Get some rest, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks.
Before we go to Tessa Duvall with the Lexington Herald Leader, let's just talk a little bit. Speaking of constitutional amendments, we have not talked about that. And just looking at it right now, Constitutional Amendment number 2, which was the shorter of the amendments on the ballot. This is about the abortion question. No, 56.2% to yes, 43.8%.
No means we do not exclude from the Constitution the possibility that a court could find some right to an abortion in the language of the Constitution. It was a hard amendment for people to understand, but I think both sides did a pretty good job getting their vote out. And I talked to some Republicans who voted against this amendment.
Why?
Because they thought it would, put in concrete the law that they consider too extreme. You know, no exceptions for rape and incest, only for threat to the woman's life. And now the Supreme Court may take it farther
on November 15th, yes.
I'd like to take it, but we'll have to wait on that. And the legislative amendment, to let the legislature call itself into session, looks like it's losing by not quite the same margin, almost the same, 55 to 45.
Yeah, and so many people might be surprised about Constitutional Amendment number 2 on the abortion, because we often hear that Kentucky is the most pro-life state in the nation. But is it the ballot language?
I don't know if you could say that. I think Utah might be more
with
so.
the exception. So in close number 2, perhaps. But is it surprising that...
I'm not surprised at all, because polls in this state have shown that people want an exception for rape and incest. And when the Kansas referendum was held, what was it, August 1st, the New York Times took a look at the demographics of that vote and extrapolated it to every state in the country and predicted what every state would vote based on the demographics. And they predicted a 53% vote against such an amendment in Kentucky. And today, at this point, with 36% of the votes counted, we have 56% against.
But the US,
probably a little less.
Yeah, a very good point about the Times. The U.S. Supreme Court decision definitely heightened and changed the conversation about this issue. And it did cause a lot of folks to consider this in a way they had not. Had that not happened, I'm not sure this vote would have been quite the same, say, a year ago.
Yes, I feel like, because this was passed a year ago in the General Assembly.
In 2021.
Yeah, and then when it was passed at the time, I remember a lot of the conversation was that, well, this is just a turnout mechanism, because at the time it was hypothetical.
That's right.
Because you still had the federal decision rules on the books, that this is a turnout strategy by Republicans. That was sort of the criticism. And I think underlying that, or the assumption and baked into that, was that, well, it will pass and it will motivate folks to the polls. But yeah, it doesn't look like it's, I think the Kansas campaign also, there was a roadmap for how to campaign, how to message this, which I don't think people had seen. And when you saw it in Kansas and saw such large numbers, you say, okay, well, maybe Kansas is not quite as conservative as Kentucky, but that was a big margin. And talking to some of the pro-life folks across the state, they were pretty pessimistic in the last week or so about the outcome. They were outspent, outmessaged.
That's right. Yeah,
and
quite a bit.
Ran the Kansas campaign, ran the Kentucky campaign.
That's right.
She came in and, yeah.
Yeah. Blair Hayden, I do want to ask you not to assume that the Emerge participants are also pro-choice, but was Emerge involved in, there's a lot of activism around this. We just talked about the money that came in, the Protect Kentucky Access campaign. So, you know, what you heard from women about this issue, those who were uterus owners, what did they have to say about this? What were you hearing from them about this proposed constitutional amendment?
Right. I was wondering if I was going to get a chance to speak on this since I'm the only woman on the panel. Thanks, Renee.
Minus another woman on the
yes.
panel. Ain't I a woman, says Bell Hooks.
And you count too. And yes, Renee, I wonder with this amendment on the ballot, how many women it actually brought out to vote. If we're seeing this high turnout, you know, a lot due to Amendment 2, and Emerge does not, well, one, you know, we really don't endorse candidates, and we don't get into these issues. We train on what it takes to run an effective campaign. But I can tell you that we have many alums across the Commonwealth who have been involved with Protect Kentucky Access, that we're running that here in Kentucky. I'm very proud of them, and it is definitely something that we've had a lot of conversations about, and I'm glad to see these percentages as predicted.
Let's go now, Al, quickly, because we want to get to Tessa Duvall with the Lexington Herald Leader. She's the Frankfurt Bureau Chief. She's been waiting for some time to speak with us. Thank you, Tessa. Can you hear Renee Shaw? Tessa Duvall, do you have Renee Shaw in your ear? So we're going to effort to make sure that she can both see and hear us. Al Cross.
Picking up on the abortion thing, the amendment was sponsored by State Representative Joe Fisher, who is running for the Supreme Court against Michelle Keller in Northern Kentucky.
And by the way,
incumbent
just
justice.
some Campbell County results. He lost Campbell County.
So
Yes.
that means what for him, because he's from Campbell
It's
County?
a big hole. I mean, I would
Right,
say
right.
You'd have to be shocked if he were to win the district.
Yeah, with, let's see, what's the percentage here? Excuse me just a second. We've got 45% of the vote in, and it's 56.6 to 43.4. It looks like, based on the trends, that Keller is going to be reelected, which I think will be a big surprise for a lot of people, because Fisher is, you know, he's a following up there. You know him better than I do, Trey. And, you know, he's
Well, for about 20 years.
But I think he ran the rabbit. You know, he ran as the conservative Republican and raised questions about partisanship in judicial races.
Yeah, I think, you know, this race and the Bilby Shepherd race raise an interesting question of, can the success that we Republicans have been having in legislative races and local races and federal races, how do you translate that to judicial races? And again, maybe it's you got to run in the right race. I mean, that's maybe the Franklin County message. But that Supreme Court district, that's Northern Kentucky and kind of the surround, you know, the 3 northern counties and the southern counties around it. That should be fertile ground for Republicans, but your Republican party's not on the ballot. And again, it's a long ballot, and people could skip it. And somebody screenshot, it was 53 to 47 in Campbell County, where Keller beat him. And then Keller ran a great campaign, and she's been very visible in that district for as long as she's been in office.
Real quickly, Bob, before we go to
judicial
Morgan
races are
McGarvey.
still largely popularity contests, whose name we know, who we might have met. Keller got around a lot these last years, many years, as did Fisher, but in a more limited way, perhaps. Because of the difference in those districts. So right time, right race, right message, whether you're running for judge or city council.
Congressman-elect Morgan McGarvey is at the podium right now, and we are going to go to him.
In the super minority every single day I was in office. I was leading the fights on key Democratic issues, even being elected Democratic leader of the Senate when a guy named Matt Bevin was governor. But despite all that, I authored and passed 18 bills into law. And not just little stuff either. We passed the first health insurance mandate in 21 years. We passed laws protecting victims of human trafficking and domestic violence. I passed the first ever bill that solely benefits Louisville's historically black college and university, making sure that kids at Simmons College got access to Kentucky tuition grant money. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't always easy, but I have never accepted the notion that we can't do something. if we're willing to listen, if we are willing to work together, if we are willing to build consensus instead of finger pointing and name calling or spreading misinformation, there is no limit to what we can achieve. Last summer, we took the kids on vacation. We went to the beach. And in the ultimate dad nerd move of the century, I took them away from the pool to go to the Kennedy Space Center. It was awesome. And when we walked in, we went into the IMAX where they talk about the Shuttle Atlantis. The Shuttle Atlantis, I didn't realize, Shuttle Atlantis, this cool thing. Somebody came up with the radical notion, let's send a reusable space shuttle into space. Not just a rocket that falls off in the ocean, let's bring it back down to Earth. Took them 12 years to figure it out. They're showing the IMAX. Sure enough, the music's going. Greta's running around my feet with her toy space shuttle. The plane's getting ready to land on the tarmac. The screen goes up, and there is the Shuttle Atlantis behind us. And I'm like, because to me, that's it. That's what our government can do. We can build a reusable space shuttle. We can put a man on the moon. We can work with private industry and speed up the distribution of a vaccine in 9 months that enabled all of us to get back to our daily lives. Because when the will of the American people and the weight of our government get behind a problem, we can solve it. And we have big problems to solve. We still must continue to help people lower costs, starting with prescription drugs. We can combat the immediate threat that is climate change. We must make sure that we as Kentuckians are at the forefront of this. We paid for the last energy revolution. We paid for it here. We led it and we paid for it. We paid for it with the majesty of our mountains and the lives of our miners. We should be at the forefront of the next energy revolution, creating good-paying green jobs right here in the energy center of the world. And our great governor, Andy Beshear, has done an amazing job on that front, bringing $7 billion in economic development to make us the electric battery car manufacturing capital of the country. We need a federal partner to build on that success. We can end generational poverty. We can ease hunger. We can create more affordable housing. We can finally make much needed investments in education, starting with examining the decades-old model of education. Let's start with public preschool, and let's continue to invest in our higher education. We can
Okay, that is now Congressman-elect Morgan McGarvey, who is the state Senate minority floor leader. So let's talk about this race. Is there a lot to talk about from this race? This was kind of a foregone conclusion that Morgan would be victor?
It's but still, you know, again, we talked earlier about the competitive mayor's race and a lot of competitive local races. And so, no, I think we talked about McGarvey in the primary when we were here in May. I think we all were pretty high on his. You saw the talent. I mean, the smiling, he slips and he catches himself. He's got his kids back there. I think he'll be a good member of Congress. Now, his challenge may be he gets there and he's in the minority, but
he's used to that.
He is used to that. That's exactly right. And while he may not be able to get things done in the minority, he'll learn and he'll figure it out. And someday the Democrats will probably be in the majority because we keep going back and forth. And my guess is he'll be a strong legislator in Congress.
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
We should say who he defeated, Stuart Ray. And I think Bob Helleringer could tell us more about Stuart Ray.
Bob? Stuart Ray.
Okay, thanks. I'm trying to wake myself up from Morgan McGarvey's stirring address. I had in Al's honor, I have a rural paper, the Woodford Sun, a rural paper I was reading. But no, the credit for Morgan McGarvey's win, he owes it all to the Republican Party, okay? Because when we were redistricting, we could have added Oldham County to the 3rd Congressional District very easily, all the eastern part of Jefferson County that Ann Northup used to have, and we would have at least had a competitive race, which people in Jefferson County would love to have.
Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they do that, Bob?
Well, actually, Mitch McConnell said he didn't want to divide Louisville. Mitch McConnell said he didn't want to divide Louisville.
The last time they listened to me, I suggested Alf Landon to run against FDR. Okay, so it's been a very long time.
Well, at least they didn't.
But the
do
fact
what
of the
Nashville
matter
did.
is,
Yeah, at least they didn't do what they did in Tennessee. Where they split Nashville three ways. So Jim Cooper wouldn't be in the House anymore.
Well, okay, let me finish. I'll be quick, Al. You've only had 90% of the show. Okay, so anyway, no, what do all incumbents do in redistricting? They protect themselves even when they don't need it. Doesn't matter what party they're in. And all these 5 Republican House members wanted to keep winning by 78% instead of 68%. So they were greedy, and Massey wouldn't give up Oldham or Eastern Jefferson County, even though his numbers, all he has to do is mail in his reelection every year. So what they've done is deprive the largest city in the state from having a competitive race for Congress where we could have had a chance to renew what happened with Ann Northup, and would the Republicans, I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest they may have wanted to prefer in an open seat to have somebody like an Ann Northup in Congress versus a Morgan McGarvey. But it was impossible when the ink was, the bill was signed to leave the 3rd district essentially the way it was. And that is a real, you only get these opportunities every 10 years. And that would have been a fair fight. That's what the League of Liberal Women Voters is for, right? Fair maps, competition. And of course, they didn't weigh in on this at all either. They were too busy worrying about Jason Nemeth getting 2 more, who won, by the way, tonight. Let's talk about that race later. Yeah. But they were too worried about him getting 2 more precincts in Oldham County. And meanwhile, we have a one-sided a congressional district in the 3rd district that suits them to a T, because we get a Morgan McGarvey who'll have ADA ratings 100% or higher. I think Morgan will try to get it even higher than 100%. So
let me interject.
Let's get Blair Hagan here real quickly before we go to Al. Blair, go ahead.
Yes, Blair.
Morgan owes his success to his own work ethic. He's passed 18 bills in the superminority as the Senate Minority Leader, and we are passing the torch to the younger generation now. And this was the right role for Morgan.
All right, Al Cross.
To boil down Bob's blather, he makes a good point. Redistricting is always an exercise by the incumbents to protect themselves. And in this case, there was not going to be an incumbent, and there was an opportunity for Republicans to, do some gerrymandering, and they chose not to do it because it's inconvenient.
They'd have to work hard to
people don't want to have to fool with different district lines. And that, folks, is one of the biggest problems in American democracy, in which legislatures controlled by one party or entire governments controlled by one party district their legislatures and congressional districts in ways that disenfranchise the electorate. Wisconsin is the greatest example of that. They're about a 50-50 state, but the legislature is overwhelmingly Republican because of what they've done with redistricting. And the Supreme Court of this country had an opportunity to use a perfectly legitimate mathematical formula to knock down that Wisconsin legislative redistricting, and they decided they didn't want to do it, that they just didn't want to get their hands dirty. This Supreme Court of the United States would be a lot better off if it had at least one person on it who had ever run for office before. They would understand the political system, and that sometimes you got to get your hands dirty.
Back to the point that you raised several minutes, maybe a half an hour ago, about Morgan McGarvey winning this seat. He has many attributes, and he was well prepared to be in the state Senate, did a sterling job. And as she cited, he passed bills on a bipartisan basis, often in tandem with Leader Damon Thayer. They were famous for it. That's the kind of work that gets results in any deliberative body, and that's why he'll be good in Washington, even the minority, and someday, if he has the chance in the majority, he'll rise to leadership.
Tessa Duvall, I think we have you this time. You are still at the Booker campaign, correct? And I know they're turning the lights down on you, so we want to get out there before you're totally in the dark. Thank you for taking a few minutes to speak with us. Good evening to you. So you heard Charles Booker's speech in its entirety.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. You heard Charles Booker's speech in its entirety, and we played a portion of that back for the viewers tonight. What can you tell us, your impressions about it? What were his main thoughts? Did he say anything about his political future? At the time we heard him, it was kind of a non-concession, right? He was still waiting for rule numbers to come in. So tell us a little bit more about what you've heard him say since.
Right. He did say that he is not conceding the race at this time. He says that, you know, the previous models that have been used to make forecasts in race like this don't take into consideration that people would in rural Kentucky would vote for a black man. And so he is confident that he is going to get that margin closer as more votes come in. And he did promise before leaving the stage that he's not done yet. He's not done fighting for Kentucky, for Kentuckians. What that specifically means, we don't yet know.
Yeah. And Daniel Cameron might say that, in fact, a black man can get rural votes, right, as the Attorney General. He didn't allude to anything about what could be next for him, right? Or did you, or have you heard him say that in the time since his speech? Has he talked to you?
I have not heard that. He has not taken questions from reporters who are present. He may later tonight, but at this point, what he does next, I do not know.
So how long does he plan on waiting it out, right? I mean, do you have any indication about when he will make the determination that he did not prove victorious tonight?
As for a time or a vote count, he wasn't specific in that when he was speaking from the stage, but it sounds like he wants to hear every vote counted, wants to be absolutely sure before, you know, he concedes that he did not win this race. Right now, he's still down quite a bit. The votes are still coming in, but it is an uphill battle for him, and I don't anticipate that we will see the projection for Rand Paul overturned.
Right. I do want to ask you, if you don't mind, a couple of questions about some state legislative races that you've been following throughout this campaign season. And when you and I had spoken a few days ago, you were really keeping your eye on House District number 20. I believe that is Patty Minter, who is seeking re-election there. Also could be a casualty of redistricting. What can you tell us about the kind of race that is? This is in the Bowling Green area.
Right. Like you said, that is in Bowling Green. Patty Minter, an incumbent Democrat, got a tough bid with redistricting, made the district much more favorable to Republicans. Last I had looked, granted, it's been a minute, there were not any votes in where I looked to see how that's going. But that is, I think, going to be one of the races to watch tonight. And I'm very eager to see how that one shakes out.
Yeah. Any others that you've got your eye on, even from the distance where you are there in Louisville?
Yeah, I think that what we're really going to look at is just seeing if Democrats can hold on to some of these seats that they have outside of Louisville and Lexington. You know, there are vulnerable Democrats in eastern Kentucky, potentially in northern Kentucky, Patty Minter, like we mentioned, in Bowling Green. So just seeing if they can hold on to these seats that aren't in the two largest urban areas will be what I'm certainly keeping my eye on when I get back to the numbers tonight.
Okay, well, thank you, Tessa Duvall, for taking some time out to speak with us. We appreciate it so very much, and have a good evening. A couple of those races that she didn't mention by name or by number, but House District 94, you have the House Minority Whip, Angie Hatton, who's got a race on her hands against Jacob Justice.
Yeah, in the early results, well, I haven't seen any results recently, but the Republicans were pretty high on Justice as a candidate, and you know, taking advantage of the fact that Hatton is in leadership, so they tried to tag her with some of the votes of the leadership, and again, consistent with crime, inflation. I think one of the wild cards is the impact of the flood on that particular race, both with turnout, because Letcher County, her base, was devastated, as we all know, and so was everybody able to vote? Conversely, did that give her a chance to maybe overcome what's clearly a Republican part of the state now and step up and be your state representative, not just your Democratic state representative? But she hasn't had a race for several cycles, like we're literally unopposed, and to be able to this time be in a very, very tough race is just how Eastern Kentucky's gone politically. We've only got 5% of the vote in, and Justice was leading by 3-1, but that's probably absentees and early votes. In the 95th,
where Ashley Tackett Lafferty faced a fairly decent challenge from Brandon Spencer. It looks like she's been reelected. There's 80% in, and she's got 64% of the vote.
Yeah, my sources in the party were more confident about Hatton going in the Hatton seat than the Tackett Lafferty seat. And that looks like what we've seen. And then the other race that was mentioned that she mentioned was the Patty Minter seat.
Patty Minter, that's
and
House
I just got a
District
text
number 20.
from House Majority Leader Stephen Rudy, and he says that the Republicans have won that seat.
So, yes, so this is also a casualty, or Ms. Minter, Representative Minter, is a casualty of redistricting because this changed dramatically.
Redistrict, yeah, and the district changed dramatically. And, you know, as he noted, no Democrats in the House in Central Time Zone. You know, it's just a big change.
Bob Babbage.
So it's a kind of the R's: registration, redistricting, retirements, and the Republican wave. Coming into tonight, we have 1 in 6 members of the House and Senate new faces. And it sounds like we're going to have a few more than that. Big change, a big transition, and a lot of work to do to bring folks together in a much larger Republican caucus, potentially, and for Democrats to coalesce and try to rebuild.
So we have with us now K.C. Parker Bell. He is not quite ready. He has Congressman-elect Morgan McGarvey in his sights, and so we'll be going to him in just a moment. Jack Brammer is with us, and you remember Jack Brammer, who used to write for the Lexington Herald-Leader for, what, 40 years? Jack Brammer, yeah, he said Jack who, but we know who Jack Brammer is, who now writes for the Northern Kentucky Tribune, and he is joining us by phone. It's good to talk to you, Jack.
Hi, Renee. I've been listening to you all. Great job. It seems today we're getting the legislative results mostly from other legislators, legislative leaders, than from some of the media who've been gathering results. So if we look back at, let's talk a little bit about State Senate 20, that in Northern Kentucky between Democrat Teresa Barton and Republican Jay Williams, the media keep reporting that it's a tight race, but we'll go with what Senate President Stivers said, that Jay Williams won that race. But I know Senator Stivers always likes for the media to double-check everything, so that's all we're doing. I think that was the most competitive Senate race we had today in Kentucky, and I believe Trey mentioned that the southern part of that district, Franklin County, probably would go for Barton, and then the northern Kentucky would come out for Jay Williams. And that from some county results we've gotten, it shows that Barton did win in Franklin County, and in Kenton and Owen County, Williams beat her more than 2-1. So Northern Kentucky did come out for Jay Williams.
There aren't that many precincts in Kenton County, though, and what looks like won the race for her is Boone, which is not reporting yet officially.
Yeah, I haven't seen Boone yet.
Yeah. You know, she won Franklin County 11,908 to 8123.
Right.
She needed to win it by a little bit more than that, I think, in order to overcome his Boone County advantage.
Right. We had another Senate race from Northern Kentucky. There was Senate District 24. That was Real Schroeder's seat. I'm just going to say preliminary figures show that the Republican Shelley Frohmeyer will win that seat, keeping that in the GOP stronghold. And she was running against Highland Heights Council member Renee Heinrich. And then in the other state Senate races, it looks like the incumbents are going to stay on down in Western Kentucky. Henderson Robert Mills, the Republican, and to Republican chagrin, Karen Berg in District 26 was as Oldham and Jefferson. She's very smart. She's very outspoken. She gets under a lot of Republican skin. It seems like she appears to win District 26. Brandon Smith seems to be doing well, Eastern Kentucky in District 30. And Jared Carpenter, Republican over in Richmond, is doing well in District 34. You mentioned some of the House races that I was looking at. Early trends show that Democrat Grayson Vandergrift was leading in House District 56, and I thought, what has the Midway Messenger wrought with this Democrat possibly winning this race against the Republican incumbent?
Jack, I no longer publish the Midway Messenger.
That was not intended to you. Okay. And the Republican incumbent, Daniel Pfister, looks like he's going to win that race after all. And that's been just kind of a mean race. Vandergrift was mayor of Midway, and there have been some social media reports that just were ugly in that race. One Republican incumbent that in the early results seems to be in trouble is Ken Fleming in Jefferson and Odom County, House District 48. Democrat Maria Sorellis is giving him a good lead, and Jason Nemus does seem to be on his way to being reelected from District 33. He was one of 10 the Democratic Party identified as extremist Republicans on their view of abortion. A Democrat in trouble in Jefferson County is in District 37, where Jeff Donahue, closely tied to labor, is being challenged by Emily Callaway. And so Angie Hatton, I'd like to see some more figures on that race, but that would be a headline, the minority House whip losing a race. And we've seen other Democratic House leaders in Eastern Kentucky over the few years, go down in defeat, and you can ask Greg Stumbo about that. Mm-hmm. And so, but in the 95 next door, Al mentioned this, that the Democrat Ashley Tackett seems to be on her way to victory. So right now, I'm just saying it's all unofficial, but those are the trends.
Well, thank you, Jack Brammer, for giving us that roundup of those really key state House and state Senate races. We appreciate you. Next time we want to see you in person, but we'll take your voice.
Okay.
Just to see you or just to hear you is good enough. Thank you, sir,
Thank
for being
you,
with us. Have a good night. Any comment about any of those races that Jack Brammer just mentioned?
Well, yeah, he mentioned a lot. So Nemus, his claimed victory, he texted me to say he thought he won by about 12 points. So
and this is Kentucky House District 33.
Which was one of the top pickups. Rachel Roberts appears to have won up in Campbell County, and the Williams race, that means 31 Republican state senators, which is a high water mark. And Senator Thayer texted me to say they were hoping to get 40% out of Franklin County for Williams. If they got 40, they thought they could win. There was a big independent expenditure effort from GOPAC. They got 41%. And so when they saw that number, they were pretty confident that he was going to win, and ultimately he did.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like that Charles Miller, a longtime representative from Southwest Jefferson County, Democrat, has been defeated by Jared Bauman. With the results we have in, I'm not sure if these are complete or not, it's 57.5 for Bauman to 42.5 for Miller. He was a big target of the Republican Party.
Bob whispered something when we were off the air that Jim Duplessis from Hardin County had retired and had created an open seat, and apparently one of the local television stations has called that for the Democrat. And now confess that was a race that wasn't really one of the ones that we had targeted as one of the likely pickups for Democrats. So there's some good news for Democrats if that in fact is true.
That's the Leonard Bratcher race.
Leonard Bratcher, yeah.
Yeah, has 100% reporting, and Leonard with 65% of the vote.
Yeah, so pretty comfortable win for a race that was not on a lot of radar screens when people were compiling their top 10 lists.
And that could have been partly a result of more women turning out because of Amendment 2.
Could be.
Okay, Bob Babbage.
Fascinating to see some of these changes. Still, I think it's a net gain for the Republicans, not only in the Senate, but in the House. That was an upset you noted, but we're trying to tally all this up and see where the General Assembly will stand. And Republicans are getting closer and closer to that 80-20 majority they were seeking.
Were they seeking an 80?
Yeah, I think that was, yes. Let's say yes. We were hoping to get 80. I think that it's a nice round number. It's huge, right? I know, like
That's the answer?
Well, no, you want 100, right? I mean,
right,
but
right.
no, but I still sitting here today. I still remember I wasn't here in 2016. I was watching y'all in the basement of my house, and watching Jeff Hoover put on his hat and taking over. To think about when I was in office, when Bob was in office, how few Republicans there were in Frankfurt. I mean, they used to joke about meeting in the phone booth, and in the Senate that wasn't far off. There was less than 10. Damon there was number 22 when he got elected about 20 years ago. Now there's 31. There could be 80 in the state Senate, and in 2016 there was I think 47 going into that election. Right, Al? Mm-hmm. So quite a change. But Mentor, I think it could be close to 80 when all is said and done.
Yeah. In the Louisville studio, Bob, I'm sure you want to chime in on the possibility
very
of 80.
briefly, because, well, I mean, that's Stephen King stuff. I mean, you can't, if you've been around as long as I have. I just want to correct, it's important to correct inaccuracies on this show. And you mentioned that Jack Brammer had worked for the Herald Leader for 40 years. Actually, that's incorrect. He worked for them 140 years. Okay, so I want to get that in there. Anyway, let's turn it over to Blair, and then I'll be glad to comment on having 80 members and tell you what a potential disaster that's going to be. But go ahead.
Thank you, Bob. I did want to comment on many of the races that Jack was talking about, and they are trends that we were expecting to see. But, of course, Renee, I need to point out our Emerge alums, and that is Highland Heights Councilwoman Renee Henrick. That is running for State Senate in District 24 in Campbell, Pendleton, and Bracken, and I'm excited to see how that's looking. I've been texting with her some, and pretty sure we have that win for Senator Karen Berg's re-election here in Jefferson County, and we're very proud of the work that Karen's been doing in the state Senate. And of course, watching Representative Patty Mentor, and that's been a very tough race. There's been a lot of money in that race. Maria Sorolis against Ken Fleming. Maria beat Ken 4 years ago, and then he came back, and so really watching that race closely as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a matchup for the third time, right? This Maria Solis and Ken Fleming, as you just may have mentioned.
No, fourth time.
Fourth time. Okay, now
Bob says 4. Bob, all right, that's right.
They've run 4 times, and yes, and this is the double rubber match, I think.
This is like the cluster power.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there was another one down there in Eastern Kentucky like that. So, Bob, I want to hear from you why the 80 is a bad idea. Is that what you were getting at?
Oh my God, no! It's a fantastic idea, but the fact of the matter is that the bigger the caucus, the bigger the factions potentially, and power goes where power will follow, or some variation of that expression. And I can foresee, just based on my own experience, that the larger this majority becomes, the further down into obscure irrelevance the minority becomes, you're going to have a power struggle. And I was there in the state Senate in 1978 when I was working on the staff for Gene Stewart. The Democrats had 30 members, and that was the year of the Black Sheep Squadron. Okay, they fought bitterly. Tom Garrett's regulars, I guess, versus John Barry and the Black Sheep, and they fought every day in the Republican 8-member caucus very quietly, but they threw their votes to John Barry, and they had all these 20 to 18 votes back and forth on the rules and all this stuff. So I can see 80 happening, but it's look out for some signs of the pressure that's going to create within such a large caucus. But other than that, I'll go home and get some champagne out. I mean, I was there in 1980 when we had 25 members, which was up 3. And guys were getting drunk in the caucus. I mean, wow, 25. Woody Allen was there, who remembered having 17. And we'd work our numbers up, and then here come redistricting every 10 years and decimate us. So that's a powerful weapon that's now being used, of course, for Republicans' benefit, much to the chagrin of the League of Liberal Women Voters. But they said nothing. They said nothing about the weird map. You ought to see Karen Berg's district, okay? It looks like Italy on its side lying underneath France. I mean, it goes every which way in Jefferson County, down streets, into courts, over culverts. It drew everything that Republicans around her didn't want, and we still had a class candidate, James Peden, a longtime member of the Metro Council, but who stepped up to try for it. I don't know what we don't get any numbers here. I don't know how close it was, but that was made to order for her, and you know, I guess maybe she pulled it off.
So let's talk about,
go.
yeah, thank you, Bob Hellringer. House District 88, this is the Sherilyn Stevenson. She's the incumbent, Democratic incumbent. Jim Coleman, up and coming, rising star perhaps in the Republican Party, but it looks like with 71, almost 72% reporting that Representative Stevenson may squeak this out.
So this is another district that changed a little bit from redistricting.
Oh, it changed a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Includes now part of Scott.
Right, and Stevenson's an interesting candidate because when she ran for the first time, it was a seat that had been held by Republicans, and she was actually endorsed by the State Chamber of Commerce. She's personable and a business owner. Coleman, his family's from Kentucky, and he moved here a few years ago to start a farm and a business, and raised a bunch of money and put up a spirited campaign. And so, yeah, it doesn't look good right now. I mean, that's still 20-something%, but that was one where that was certainly a targeted race for Republicans to try to win.
Yeah. Any other comment about that race? And I'll go to Blair here in a minute, and she can comment about Representative Stevenson.
Yeah, Coleman brought quite a bit to that race, and Stevenson had a tough one before, and this was a tough one again. He has quite a family story and business story, but obviously it didn't exactly translate into a win from what we're seeing, but we're not quite finished with the race yet. Stevenson may have pulled out once again.
We'll see.
I just got a text that said Scott hasn't reported in that race. That's part of the new part of the district that Al mentioned. And it could be some of the folks who are looking at this think that Coleman still has a shot if Scott County comes in. That's the way they
take him
hope.
over the edge.
Yeah.
Right. Blair Hayden, and we're going to get Al Cross another cough drop.
I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right. Blair Hayden, can you chime in on this House District 88 race?
I have some cough drops here, Renee, but I'm sorry I can't get them to you all.
Yeah. Virtual cough drops, yes.
Sherilyn has been she's been loved by Republicans and Democrats, and I think she's done a terrific job serving and working across party lines. And the educators and teachers really came out for Sherilyn in her first race and really had grassroots efforts. And with this district change for her, she has worked really hard. And I've talked to some Democrats in Scott County who were working for her there, and I think that she's just really done a tremendous job, and I'm glad to see the results looking like this for her.
Thank you, Blair. Let's talk about a couple of these Kentucky Supreme Court districts. We've already talked about District number 6 with Michelle Keller, the justice, and Joseph Fisher. But let's talk about District number, is it 2? That's really that South Central Kentucky Bowling Green. Talk to us about this. The candidates are Kelly Thompson, this is nonpartisan, of course, and Sean Alcott, Sean being a female. And it looks like Kelly Thompson with 53.4%, Sean Alcott with 46.6%, only, like 29% reporting.
So this is the seat currently held by current Chief Justice Minson, who's been in office for close to 20 years, a long time. He retired. Judge Thompson is on the Court of Appeals right now. His father was the president of Western Kentucky University. I remember when he got elected to the Court of Appeals, a lot of people thought that, going back to what Al said about popularity contest, that name was important. Alcott's another good name in Bowling Green, which is the heart of this district. This is kind of a Warren County-centric district. Think the old Bill Natcher congressional district, because that's what this was drawn from.
It no longer includes those western counties. Right, yeah. It's more straight up and down.
Yeah, yeah, maybe more like the current Guthrie district, I guess. Than but I think Thompson, having been elected across the district a couple times ago as a Court of Appeals, probably was thought to be the favorite in this race. But as you said, Renee, only 33%, so anything can happen.
And there are no votes in from Warren County. That's where both the candidates live.
Yep.
And the last time John Minton had a contested race, his opponent was Kelly Thompson. And Kelly Thompson won Warren County, but John Minton carried the rest. And there's a real question about that Warren County vote that's going to decide the race, obviously.
We are efforting to get Congressman-elect Morgan McGarvey. Casey Parker Bell will be having him momentarily, so if I interrupt the gentleman and lady on this next question, you'll know why. State Senate District number 22, Donald Douglas, who won in a special election, is got a little bit of an edge, but we're going to talk more about that on the other side of this conversation that Casey Parker Bell has with Congressman-elect Morgan McGarvey. Gentlemen, good evening, and congratulations to you, Mr. McGarvey.
Thank you, Renee.
Congressman-elect Morgan McGarvey, congratulations, like Renee said. What does it mean in this moment right now? The election's over and you've just won.
Thank you. I mean, it's so many emotions. These campaigns are roller coasters, as probably people on set and people watching know. There's so much hard work that goes into it. So it's this momentary period of relief, it's happiness, it's excitement, of course. You also know that tomorrow the work starts. Not only do I have a committee hearing in Frankfort, then you've got to start really getting ready for everything that happens with going into a new office. But overall, that's exciting, and I am excited about to have the opportunity to continue to be a legislator on the federal level.
Now, obviously, we don't have results in from all across the country, but a lot of people are projecting that Republicans will take the House back in Congress. So how do you plan to work in a Republican-led House?
Well, throw me in that briar patch again. You know, I've been in the super minority every single day that I've been in office. I've never let that change the way I legislate. I made a promise 10 years ago, and I've stuck true to it, that I'm going to go and I'm going to stand up for what I believe in. I'm going to fight for people in Louisville, but I'm going to do it in a way where I try to get things done. I've done it. I passed 18 bills into law in my time in Frankfort. I've influenced numerous others. And look, I've had losses along the way, but that hasn't stopped progress. And so regardless of who's in the majority or the minority tomorrow morning, the work remains the same. And that work is to actually make people's lives a little bit better every day. I'll do what I can to make that happen.
One piece of advice many older congressional members give to newer members is pick a topic. Find something that you're interested in that you want to change. What is the one thing that you would like to change while you're in Congress?
Yeah, you know, it's a little bit like asking to me what's your favorite movie or who's your favorite kid. But being from Kentucky, you know, and working in the state legislatures I've seen three issues that really do impact our state daily: healthcare, education, and energy. I think we need to make sure that everybody has access to health care. I think we need to continue to improve public education starting in preschool. And again, we're in a transition in energy, and I think Kentucky deserves to be on the forefront of that new green energy economy, creating good-paying jobs right here in Kentucky.
Washington is perceived as hyper-partisan right now. One of the things you're known for in Frankfort is working across party lines. But it's a different culture, at least the perception of it is up there. How can you work in a hyper-partisan culture to get what you want done and help the people in Louisville?
Well, you know, Frankfort's no cakewalk. And so I've done it in Frankfort. Look, there's an old saying, you don't know what it's like to play in the NFL until you've played in the NFL. I've not served in Washington yet. I see the hyper-partisanship that everyone else sees. But that partisanship exists in Kentucky, too. And again, I have done it in a way where I think any of my colleagues would tell you, I'm a Democrat. I stand up for what I believe in. But when it's possible, I do find ways to get things done and work with people to help people out in their daily lives. That's what being a legislator is all about, whether it's constituent services or whether it's policy. It's not the fancy speeches. It's not Twitter. It's doing the work that helps people.
Yeah. Obviously, you'll be leaving your position in Frankfort as Senate Minority Leader. We will have a new Senate Minority Leader in the next General Assembly. But do you have any parting words for your other Democrat members of the General Assembly on how to get things done and perhaps how to turn things around and cut into these supermajority leads?
Yeah, you know, look, it's cliche, but it's true. We do have more in common than we have that differentiates us. Focus on some of those commonalities. And you know what I've always tried to do in Frankfort is not make it personal. I deeply believe in a lot of the policies that I support, and it hurts sometimes when I lose on those policies, but don't make it personal. Keep it to the policy, fight for what you believe in, and live to work another day.
Congressman-elect Morgan McGarvey, thank you for taking a couple minutes with us. We really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Renee, back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Casey. We appreciate your work tonight. Thank you for being with us, and we have more to talk about. Thank you. If you're just joining us, you're about an hour and a half late, but it's okay because we got another almost 50 minutes to go. I'm Renee Shaw, and we have some great experts here in the Lexington studio, in the Louisville studio, and we are covering the campaigns across the state. So we thank you for making KET your election night choice. A couple of Senate Senate districts we want to catch up on, and then talk to the communications director for the Republican Party of Kentucky. That's Sean Southard, in just a moment. So, Sean, stand by with us in Frankfort. Senate District 22, I was talking about that before we threw it to Casey in Louisville. Donald Douglas, who's the incumbent, who won in a special election, 52.8% to Chuck Eddy, Democratic Party. He's run as a Republican for Congress a few years back, getting so far 47.2% of the vote, and this is about 63% reporting. Anything spectacular to say about this particular race? Is it surprising that Chuck Eddy is giving Donald Douglas this kind of run?
Yes, it's closer than I think any of us expected or anybody else. I haven't heard any word that it would be this tight, so we'll be following that for the balance. He won a year ago, then he won the primary, and then he's running for the third time in a year, essentially.
Right. And he had a pretty tough
Chuck
primary.
Eddy is a former Republican, right?
He is.
So he has plenty of ties in that party. Knows lots of people in Fayette County, which that section of which in the district he has carried.
Interesting. Trey, you have anything to add to that, or?
Not on this one, no.
Yeah, so let's talk about Bob. While Casey was in that interview, you had whispered about New York Times is reporting what?
U.S. Senate would be 51-49 GOP, which means Leader McConnell would be Majority Leader McConnell.
There you have it.
Of course, there was some talk in the last couple of days that Senator Scott from Florida might actually mount a challenge. I doubt he would do that, but when interviewed on Meet the Press, he wouldn't say that he wouldn't. I think there's definitely some unhappiness or uncomfortability within the Republican caucus, mainly because their leader keeps being attacked by Donald Trump. And Donald Trump remains the most powerful person in the Republican Party. But Leader McConnell lines up these votes for the next leadership election right after the preceding leadership election. And he keeps these colleagues of his close to the vest, and he's really good at following them, not just leading them.
What he's been able to do in this election, because President Trump has all this money in a super PAC, and he hasn't really spent much of it. On the other hand, the Senate Leadership Fund, which is everybody knows is the McConnell vehicle, has been really stepping up to the plate and helping out Republicans in these close Senate races. And so my suspicion is if Scott runs, we're going to get revenge for him moving Columbia HCA to Nashville. Louisville's going to win this battle, and McConnell will prevail. But Trump has been interesting. Yesterday, he told reporters on the bus that he wanted to go after McConnell and didn't want him to be leader. Today, publicly, he reversed himself, or didn't acknowledge reversing himself, said something totally different. So that's
well, he probably understands that money equation just as all the senators do.
Yeah.
You make a very good point. Trump spent all of $15 million helping Republican senators or Senate candidates, and McConnell and his PACs raised what? $500 million or something like that?
Some insane amount of number. And he put it in all these races where Trump could have gotten some support. And so, that's one of the ways you become leaders. You help people win. And then those folks say, thank you, I support you for leadership.
I don't think Scott would get 10 votes against Mitch McConnell out of 51.
Right. Sean Southard, thank you for your patience tonight, sir. You're joining us from our Capitol Annex studio there in Frankfort. We appreciate your patience. So I don't know if you've been able to hear some of the conversation up to this point. You have. Okay, you're nodding. Do you care to comment? Okay, you care to comment particularly about the news that New York Times says 51-49 GOP Senate?
Well, I think that voters across the country have embraced the red wave washing over the country, and I think that the voters want a check on Joe Biden in Washington, D.C., and there's no better person to be that check in the U.S. Senate than both of our U.S. senators, Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul. And so it appears to be good news for both of our senators tonight, and we look forward to seeing how that news progresses going forward.
So I want to talk to you about some state legislative races, and I'll let you determine which ones you want to comment on. But it looks like, let's start with the state Senate, that there is one pickup there, making it 31-9. Democrats losing losing again, or slimming their status there in the Senate. So talk to us about that.
Yes, so the Republicans across the state this cycle decided to go on offense as it relates to educating voters about the Biden record and how every single Democrat up and down the ballot agreed with Joe Biden, signed a pledge to support the National Democrat Party's policies. And so we educated voters across the state in the state Senate races as well. And we did that in the State House. And so we're looking forward to seeing those numbers roll in with Shelley Funke Frohmeyer, as well as Jay Williams there as well, and keeping an eye there on James Peden and the Karen Berg race. But we're at no risk of losing our supermajorities in either houses. And after tomorrow, we obviously look forward to making the case that in 2023, that Andy Beshear is just another national Democrat, and we need to make him be a one-term governor.
So you think you're going to get to the 80 and maybe even surpass it in the Kentucky House?
Well, I don't like to count my chickens before they're hatched, but we feel very optimistic, particularly when you look at what's happening in and around Louisville. The Republicans this cycle have been focused like a laser on the issues that matter most to voters, and that's inflation and crime. And so if you look what's happening in the state house races in and around Louisville, and then you look at some of the other house races, particularly the Angie Hatton race, I've been told that she has called Jacob Justice to concede. And then as we move forward to Western Kentucky, we feel pretty good about where things are looking for Kevin Jackson in the Patty Minter race in Bowling Green.
Yeah, so that's House District 20, and we were just talking about that just a moment ago. So I hate to jump all the way to the 2023 cycle, but that's how we roll. You know, we never just satisfied in the current election cycle. And you mentioned about what this could do, the momentum that could build for next year for Republican nominees. And there's a pretty wide field there, Sean,
We have an embarrassment of riches, Renee. We have so many people. It's because Kentucky has become a solidly Republican state. As you know, and your panelists know, is that we changed the voter registration this year to being Republican controlled for the first time. And so we look forward to making sure that everyone knows that a Republican nominee in 2023 is going to be much more in tune with the values of Kentuckians than Andy Beshear, who is, make no mistake, a Biden Democrat.
He does have, what, 59% approval rating, according to a latest poll, and is one of the most popular, if not the most popular governor in the nation. So how do you overcome... Democratic, excuse me. Thank you for that clarification there, Al. So how do you overcome that kind of status?
Well, the only poll that matters is the one on Election Day, and so we look forward to a rigorous campaign once we have a nominee in May of 2023, and making sure that voters know that, again, the Republicans are much more well-suited to lead this state. We're much more in tune with the values of Kentuckians. And at the end of the day, we believe that they will ultimately reject Andy Beshear in 2023.
Well, thank you, Sean Southard. We appreciate your time. Anything else you care to leave us with before you go?
No, thank you, Renee, for having me.
Okay, have a good evening. Al Cross.
The Republicans clearly did a good job of running against Joe Biden. Of course, you might say that's like shooting fish in a barrel when he's at 42%. But what Sean said about Democrats signing a pledge to support the policies of Joe Biden, that's actually a requirement under state law, gentlemen. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
When you sign up to be a candidate in a particular political party, you have to say, I subscribe to the tenets of this party and I will support the party and its candidates. It's just, you know, it's
so both sides do that.
It is boilerplate. But
we don't have a platform now in the Republican Party. We just support whatever. I mean, literally, we didn't adopt the platform at the last convention, so it's a little bit easier to run as a Republican now.
Yeah, that's what happens when your party gets hijacked by somebody like Donald Trump. But Beshear is the most popular Democratic governor in the country, and he is not going to be a pushover. The biggest question mark in that race remains Trump. Is he going to be credible enough to push a Republican nominee over the top against Beshear? We don't know.
Yeah.
I got some news from Kenton County, if I can share it.
Yes, sure.
So there's one precinct that's out. It's a rural.
Which race are you talking about?
Well, I'll give a couple. So
Okay.
Stephanie Dietz, Buddy Wheatley. So one of the top contested races.
This
There's
is
one
House District
precinct in Kenton
65.
County that's out. It's not in that district, but in Kenton County, if you could vote at any polling place, so there could be a few votes. But Dietz is up about 100 votes. So this one may may end up in recount range. But it looks like Stephanie Dietz has defeated the incumbent Buddy Wheatley. And earlier we were talking about in Campbell County how Joe Fisher lost his home county. Well, next county over, Michelle Keller, she's from Kenton County. She beat Fisher by about 20 points in Kenton County. So I think we can put that Supreme Court race to bed if we hadn't already. But the Dietz beating Wheatley, that's one more closer to 80, the Republicans.
I think we have with us now Rylan Barton, who is the managing editor of Kentucky Public Radio and the Ohio Valley Resource. There he is. Good evening to you, Rylan.
Hi, Renee. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. So you've been following a lot. What are you taking away from the results tonight?
Well, I think one of the most fascinating results to follow is what's going on with these constitutional amendments. It looks like they are the no votes are still winning in this, especially on and we will see and wait for the final results for all this to roll in. But if that no vote holds on Amendment 2, the anti-abortion amendment, that's kind of a fascinating thing to imagine. I think anybody who looks at Kentucky politics, who looks at the makeup of the state legislature, the way Republicans talk about abortion in the state, you would figure that this amendment would sail through with flying colors. There was a lot of talk, and especially comparing to how Kansas, another pretty conservative state, although it has a Democratic governor as well, that they also rejected this amendment. So there might be some similarities there, but that there seems to be some limit to what voters would like to approve and how they want abortion to be regulated by lawmakers, or, to what extent they want courts to be able to weigh in on something like this. This is going to be very interesting heading into next week when the state Supreme Court is going to be taking up a case over this very matter on this issue, now being litigated in state court systems.
Yeah, and that's no coincidence, right? So let's talk about Constitutional Amendment number 1, which also seems to be going down by almost the same margins. Surprise to you or not?
I don't think so much of a surprise. I think a lot of people have talked about this, the CVS receipt amendment, although, as you'll see, there's a slightly tighter margin than Amendment 2 at this point. I think one really interesting thing about the numbers of this is how many fewer people voted either for or against this amendment, which is something that one might imagine a voter doing when they see this really long missive included in their ballot, and they don't quite know what to do with it, and so they don't end up voting one way or the other. That is just a hypothesis of what happened here, but there's a big difference in the number of people who voted on that amendment versus on Amendment 2. So that's an interesting thing. There wasn't a whole lot of talk about this amendment. A lot of the oxygen in the room was taken up by that Amendment 2 discussion.
Yeah, and it was long, 744 words, and as Al Cross pointed out earlier in our coverage, it was difficult to understand, and perhaps people don't understand something, they just vote against it, right?
Yeah.
Anything else you care to share with us about what you're following? You got your eye on any particular state legislative races that you're seeing that you're wondering how the turnout's going to be on that?
I mean, y'all have been really covering the state legislative beat pretty well during the program. I've been keeping an eye on what y'all are saying. I mean, one thing that just came across the desk, and I think you guys talked about a little bit, was it looks like Patty Minter has lost the race in Bowling Green. She was the only Democrat left in the Central Time Zone in the state House of Representatives. Looking like a couple other, I believe I saw Angie Hatton was trailing in the Eastern Kentucky district. One of two remaining Democrats in Eastern Kentucky. Looks like it was a big win for Republicans at the legislative level, that they were likely to be building on their supermajorities, especially in the state House of Representatives. So yeah, that's a thing for everybody to be watching and thinking about going into this next legislative session. What's that going to look like? Thinking also, especially, if that Amendment 2 ends up failing, how are lawmakers going to treat that? There's been some talk of the possibility of, would Republicans ever pass some sort of exceptions allowing or more exceptions to allow abortion in Kentucky, which is almost regulated abortion out of existence. I think that's a pretty tough sell. I can't imagine what the primary election for Republicans would look like after a vote like that. But there's going to be a lot of interesting discussions happening in that Republican super majority, nearing around 80, people in their caucus at that point. And
it seems like the only rural Democrat in the Kentucky legislature in the House is Ashley Tackett Lafferty, right? Didn't she, Al Cross, she was able to apparently win. So, we talk about the urban-rural divide. What does this do to that dilemma and that question when, it seems that there are no rural Democrats save one in the Kentucky House.
It certainly seems to sharpen that a lot, and especially because it seems like Republicans are able to chip away a little bit more at some of the urban side of that as well. I think there's looks like incumbent Representative Charlie Miller, Democratic Representative Charlie Miller, is trailing in that race in the southern Louisville area, and this is something Republicans have been really trying to make happen, to chip away at those the Democratic bastions that remain in Kentucky. And maybe not quite as successful as they thought that could have been this year, but showing some successes.
All right. Ryland Barton, thank you so very much. We'll be talking to you on Kentucky Edition on tomorrow night, so we'll get another double dose of you. Thank you so very much for your time. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Okay, so where things stand right now, we thank you for sticking with us on KET for our election 2022 coverage. We do have Bob Hellringer and Blair Hayden in our Louisville office, and Bob Hellringer? Did I not say that right? I know, it's been a while since we heard from you.
You got to pronounce it like you're in Monroe County, remember?
Monroe County. I don't know if I can muster that. But
Renee,
quickly,
on behalf of Blair, we've been sitting here for 2 hours. No one has come by to take our drink order. Come on.
Well, times are tight.
Bob's just jealous of what's in this cup.
Yeah. They're little teacups anyway. Yeah. You should not be jealous. They're tiny. They're made for little tea parties. I tell you what, so let's catch our breath, because we've been going for about an hour and 56 minutes long. So we're going to take a sip of water here, allow our viewers also to take a breath, but we still want you to hang with us. Right now, we're going to show you the results in a loop of some very selected key races that you helped decide today. So on the other side of that, we'll be back with more election 2022 coverage right here on KET. Thank you for continuing to watch KET's coverage of Election 2022. I'm Renee Shaw. Thank you for being with us this evening. We started out at 8 o'clock, and we're still here for the next half hour. We're glad to be joined in the Lexington studio by Bob Babbage, Kentucky Secretary of State from 92 to 96, journalist Al Cross, Director of the Institute for Rural Journalism and Community Issues at the University of Kentucky, and Trey Grayson, Kentucky Secretary of State from 2004 to 2011. We appreciate you both, for all three of you, for hanging around. Some more to report, and we don't know completely about the outcome of the Louisville mayor's race, but what we can tell you is that Jeffersontown Mayor Bill Diriff has given a concession speech, and we recorded that, and here's part of what he had to say.
We've had a great 18 months. We've had a lot of people that have stood up and said, yes, we need a change in Louisville. We have a lot of people that said we need safety in Louisville, and we said Rick Sanders was going to come with us. We realized what economic development meant, and I am warmed and humbled by the people that have been here tonight and the people that have helped me over that time frame. You all have made the difference in this community. We have left a mark on this community to where we want this community to go. But unfortunately, it's counted in votes. It's not counted in experience. And so we have to call it tonight, and I called the opponent and said he will be the next mayor of Louisville. But I'm not going away. I'll be here for another race some other time. I want to thank my wife for giving up 18 months of our life together, and my kids, my grandkids. The two up here are the two that we did it for. So we hope that all of you all have learned something from this experience. We can unite this community once again because it's very much broken. And I look forward to working with all you all again. And God bless you, and thank you for everything you've done for me. We are a family. Thank you. Thank you all.
And you just heard there Jeffersontown Mayor Bill Diriff giving his concession speech in the race for Louisville mayor. And we are hoping that we do hear something from Mayor-elect Craig Greenberg before the end of our coverage tonight at 10:30. So we do want to bring you up to date on a couple of races that have been developing. And this is House District 25. And this is an interesting situation here.
So earlier we talked about how it looked like out of nowhere the Democrats have picked up the seat that was formerly held by the retiring state representative Jim Duplessis. Catherine Leonard was the Democrat who appeared to have won the race. But then we got some chatter that maybe there was an error, like a transposition of a number. And Leonard tweeted out a little bit ago that she said that what the reporting is incorrect. It doesn't match what's on the website. And she said, it does not look like I will be serving Hardin County as your next state representative. So that Bratcher, the Republican candidate would win that race, which is what we all expected.
Right.
But it looks like through an error, we may have prematurely called the race incorrectly.
Right, and we just saw that on the screen that doesn't match up. So we'll keep our eye on that race. Any others? So we're still keeping our eye on these amendments as well, because we do have almost 3/4 of the precincts reporting at this particular point, but there could be.
Well, based on the trend, you have some non-metropolitan counties voting against those amendments. They're not truly rural counties, but they're non-metropolitan, and that's an indicator that both those amendments are going to lose.
Okay. All right.
Kind of thought that was coming. I want to mention Amanda Mays-Bledsoe, council member in Lexington, who will be a new state senator. Definitely an example of a new voice, a new generation of leadership.
Kentucky Senate District number 12.
Right. And this is Alice Forkey-Kerr's seat for quite some time. For Blair Hayden, for Julie Rocky Adams, Ellen Cole, women like that who work to get women and who recruit candidates, that's the kind of person you're looking for, someone very solid in experience, civic experience, and faith leader as well.
So we want to go to our Louisville studio because we still have sticking around with us. There's some night owls, Bob Hellringer and Blair Hayden. Thank you so very much, because this is past the time I think we had asked you to commit. So we appreciate you hanging in there. I think you've heard the conversation that we just had. Are you nodding there? Is that Bob? I can't see you from where I'm
Bob
sitting.
being Bob.
It's just Bob being Bob. So we're talking about these state legislative races. I want to go to you, Blair. Doesn't look good for House Minority Whip Angie Hatton, District 94. Talk to us about the significance of losing a leader, legislative leader in the Democratic ranks.
Absolutely, Renee. This is part of the gerrymandering and the redistricting, and it was bad for Angie, and we were worried about losing her. Been really proud of her leadership and. Representative Hatton's work to bring a lot of younger Democrats into the fold, and she's been doing a lot for the flooding and the victims of that down in eastern Kentucky, and I know that this will be a tough loss for the Democrats in leadership in the minority there in the state house, but I know that Angie will continue to do everything she can to help constituents there in eastern Kentucky.
So can you contextualize that the Republicans are looking in the House at a possibly 80-20 split? What does that mean for the direction of the Democratic Party as a whole when it comes to the losses that you're suffering tonight?
Renee, we will swing back around and we'll be in the majority again. And so we're going to focus on that. We're going to keep focus on building the bench. I'm going to look at these local races. I've got 5 Emerge alums in Fayette County that have won Urban County Council there. 3 are reelected and 2 are first-time candidates. I've got reelection in Radcliffe, Kentucky for council, reelection in Elizabethtown. These Democrats, we can stay focused on these local races and building the bench and try to stay positive that way.
So, Bob Hellringer, I asked you this before about, possibly 80-20 split, super-duper majority for Republicans in the House, and we know that now there's 31-7 Democrats in the state Senate, so the majorities keep expanding for the Republicans in Kentucky.
I've heard it now for 3 election cycles, well, actually 4, that the Republicans, if they ever got in the majority, would lose it because they would pass all these extreme laws and take the state in a direction it doesn't really want to go into, and they would run away with this. And they passed right to work, and they passed pro-life bills, and they passed school choice. They've gone after every item on the conservative agenda with aggression, and we keep adding and adding and adding every election cycle. We're immune to the national trends. I can't talked about Robin Webb before, my hero, but if she were to retire, we would we'd get that seat with another Senate district where there probably wouldn't be a Democrat file. We're getting to the point where the only Democrats left in the General Assembly are going to be a little coterie in Jefferson County and a smaller little gathering in Fayette County with 1 or 2 here or there in Covington or somewhere, but and Frankfort, but that's it. And it shows the strength of our party that we reflect the values, something Craig Greenberg talked about in his ad, to reflect the values. Well, the values outside of Louisville and Lexington are conservative. Not even center-right, they're conservative. And they're electing people cycle after cycle that represent their interests. That's what elections do. And so you don't have any Democrats basically west of Louisville. I remember going to Frankfort in 1980 when Woody Allen and Ronnie Lehman were the only Republicans west of Louisville, and in Butler County and Grayson County. So I'm glad they're both still alive. And there's somebody somewhere has got some smelling salts under Woody and and Ronnie because I don't think even they ever thought, as hard as Woody worked all those years, driving that big Lincoln, putting 400,000 miles on it, recruiting all over this state. My hat's off to him. Not wearing a hat, but I want to give him credit. He drove everywhere, recruiting. He was his own Emerge and Kentucky Strong, and all he said was Hellringer. He did it all on his own money, and he said, Hellringer, all I ever want is a two-party system. Well, we've graduated from the two-party system that he so earnestly wanted to a one-party system, his party, the Republican Party.
Can you comment really quickly?
Congratulations, Woody.
Yes. Can you comment really quickly? I think you were able to hear the concession speech by Bill Diriff, who conceded his mayoral bid.
Yes.
Care to comment,
I did
sir?
hear it.
Okay. Any commentary you'd like to provide quickly?
It's very.
Does that leave you speechless, Bob?
You're asking a lawyer and a politician to be brief and concise. Only judges can do that. But anyway, I feel it's a shame. I think the best man lost, the better man lost. Bill is just a class guy. He would have really helped us. I don't think he really talked about this a whole lot in the campaign, but he could have really helped us in Frankfort. That's where the strength and the power is, and it's dominated by Republicans. And Bill is known by everybody in Frankfort. He was president of the League of Cities for many years, and knew the halls of Frankfort inside and out. Mm-hmm. And Louisville needs help from Frankfort. And I'm not so sure they're going to get it. But Bill would have done a great job. He's not ideological. He just wanted to run a great city, make a great city greater. And all right. I just feel it's a shame. But I think, he'll be around. Yeah. And I hope he can find something that we can put him to work.
Al Cross.
You make a good point that leads to a larger point. I'm afraid we're risking the recreation of the old rural-urban divide in this state. For the last couple of decades, I think there's been a sense in the legislature that Louisville was the great economic engine of the state, and investment needed to be made there. The funding of the Yum Center is probably the biggest example of that. More recently, you've had Senator Stivers and others being involved in the West End development. And when you have this sort of rural-urban divide with all the Democrats, or most of the Democrats being in Louisville and the rest of the state Republican, that eventually is going to result in some the heck with Louisville kind of attitude in the legislature.
Well,
Don't you guys think so?
I think that's true. There has been an urban-rural divide a little bit in Frankfort, but I think that's where Nemis's win today and Fleming's apparent win, plus the potential pickups in more the south end of Louisville by Republicans. We now have a fair number of House Republicans from Louisville who can represent Louisville, the largest urban area. And then similarly, if Dietz's win holds up in northern Kentucky, now you have almost every representative in northern Kentucky, another urban area, with some Republicans. So that can help a little bit. But I think, that is a concern with in a state that's had an urban-rural divide for a long time. It used to be in the Democratic Party. You had the two factions. And now that the Republicans are the majority party in the legislature, there is that risk. But as an urban Republican, it's weird to call myself urban. I'm a suburban guy, but by this conversation, I'm an urban guy.
There's long been a divide in the Republican Party between the urban-oriented Republicans. They're more oriented towards Rockefeller and Marlowe Cook, and the rural people were more oriented toward Richard Nixon and Louis Nunn.
Yeah.
The rural-urban divide is very evident to us in Frankfort, but also across the country, just state to state as we work. This comes up all the time, and even in other countries. So it's here to stay, and we have to face it deliberately, understand the economic challenges of all our communities, economic development proposals which are pending now for next year, which could make a difference, and coming together in a different kind of sense. Those caucuses can do that, particularly the Republican caucus can do that, as Trey's described. And for Al's touch on history, this is a different time, a different moment, and the competition with other states and for industry, for jobs, for future is very compelling when it comes to urban and rural cooperation. Lexington's working right now to draw the region together, as it has for some time, because it's all interdependent. But it's tough on the politics, and that's where we've got to concentrate.
So let's talk about the Lexington mayor race, but we do want to make a correction. I think it was said earlier that the Kentucky Chamber had endorsed Sherilyn Stevenson.
In her first race.
In her first race, but they did endorse Jim Coleman in this most recent race.
I think I said it correctly that it was in the first race, so whoever texted you.
Ashley Watts.
Yeah, Ashley, I said it correctly. I said in the first race.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure it was clear.
Or I meant to at least, anyway.
Okay, let's talk about the Supreme Court, the 2nd District.
Well, I don't have anything really new to point out other than the likelihood that Kelly Thompson, judge of the Court of Appeals, is going to win the race over Sean Alcott, fellow Bowling Green attorney. Warren County is still out. Barron County is officially out, but I am informed that Thompson carried Barron County by a big margin. And Alcott has only carried Hardin County of all the counties. And right now, the total is with about half the vote in, it's about 57 to 43. So it looks like Kelly Thompson is likely to win. Let's just say he's leading. We may not be able to get any final results by 10:30. I just want to make sure we touch that base because that really is the other big race we've not talked about on a very unusual election night where the most interesting races were really things that weren't partisan or weren't supposed to be partisan. Constitutional amendments and Supreme Court races.
Was this Supreme Court?
And the Lexington mayor's
Was
race.
that particular Supreme Court race, did it take on a partisan tone?
It did not. I asked Thompson over the weekend if he had been the subject of attack ads from this outfit that was involved in the Shepard-Bilby and Keller-Fisher races. And he said, not to his knowledge. And I said, when did you start running this ad that identifies you as a Republican? And he said, I'm not running that ad. That's some other PAC, a PAC that I'd never heard of. So we still have some answers to be found in the 2nd District Supreme Court race.
Lexington mayor, I don't believe we have said that Linda Gordon was reelected to another term. And so, Bob Babbage, you want to comment on that, and even Blair Hayden, if she'd like.
Well, her total looked to be so similar to the primary. I was texting back some of our good sources saying, are you sure this isn't the primary number? Because it didn't appear to change a whole lot. She won with 70 plus. Her opponent, Kloiber, very determined. Could certainly run again. He's been a city council member. For the council, it's Wu, Brown, and Ellinger. Not returning will be Bill Farmer, who had been a district council member, or Maloney, who'd been a council member for some time.
Any comment on that, Al Cross?
Looks like David Kloiber is running for the next time.
Might be. Very good point.
Because he's got plenty of money.
Yes, he does.
And Linda Gordon is fairly old for a mayor.
Right. He put, what, $600,000 of his own money into the race?
Yes. He has business assets and family foundation, interesting business story. So he could certainly make another try, as Al points out, or go a different direction altogether politically.
Blair Hayden.
Renee, I thought it was great to see David make a run after serving a term for council, and his family has a foundation. They've done wonderful things for the library and the public schools there in Fayette County. But this race looks a lot like when Linda ran the first time against Ronnie Baston, and we saw similar numbers in the primary and in the general, and Linda is well liked. Of course, it's a nonpartisan race there in Lexington for mayor, and Linda's been supported by a lot of Democratic women. She's endorsed by the former mayor, David worked hard as a first-time candidate for mayor, and think it was a good race.
And while the race is nonpartisan, Linda Gordon is a registered Republican. And shortly after Roe versus Wade was overturned, she came out against Amendment 2, which might have been a move to reach out to liberals and progressives who were a bit skeptical of her. She looked like she really didn't have much of any trouble in winning re-election.
Many were surprised that she came out.
I believe she was endorsed by...
It was an unusual move.
But I think
she was endorsed by the Fairness Campaign.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Blair, you were saying that she was endorsed by the Fairness Campaign?
Yes, I believe so. Seafair. So yeah, the LGBT community was certainly behind her as well.
Bob.
As Rebecca Hartzog pointed out last night, she has a good feel for the community for sure. Knows it exceedingly well. Served on council, I think, longer than any other person ever, and consequently took a stand against Amendment 2 that she felt was consistent with what she had said before, and also important for this race and this time.
And she's a nurse by trade, which she mentioned in making that announcement.
Yeah.
By trade? What about profession?
By occupation or profession, yes, sir. I just say by trade, Bob.
Is this on?
It's
Yeah,
because
your
I'm a
mic is on,
journalist, and I
Bob.
say we're a craft, not a
That thought
profession.
came out of your head.
My God. My God, like she's a mechanic or something. Working on a car.
So we have less than 5 minutes of our coverage, and we thank you for being with us this evening. And as we wrap things up, we still have some races that we're still watching, Trey Grayson.
Yeah, the open seat in Louisville, District 31, which is one of the ones that was created when two Democrats were put together. Witten, the Republicans, up 700 votes in the last report. So I don't know that we're ready to call that one yet, but that was another one that was a potential Republican pickup. What was interesting about this race is Witten was temporarily knocked off the ballot because of concern that maybe she'd filed a day too early because of redistricting, and then she was able to get back on the ballot, and which was good for her because it looks like she might actually win. So if that's the case, that puts the Republicans right on the cusp of 80.
Right.
Because I think that would be 5 or 6 pickups. I think that would be the sixth pickup with maybe 2 Democratic pickups and a couple that are up in the air.
Yeah,
Impressive performance by Witten to overcome that sidebar there.
And the numbers that you saw on the screen are not accurate. I think it said 0% reporting, and then Sue Foster was ahead. So don't know why that there's an inconsistency in what you're getting and versus what viewers are saying.
Yeah.
So
well,
we're going to go with what
texting
Trey Grayson says, right?
Yeah, texting and Twitter, and I do make mistakes. I was wrong about Ashley. And I had a little sidebar conversation.
Yeah, I'm on
I got
that
my
text.
Democratic House women candidates mixed up, and so I was definitely wrong, Ashley Watts. I'm sorry.
Yes. So any other race that's still uncertain at this particular point?
Well, I think the Coleman-Stevenson race, I don't know if we
This
ever...
is House District 88.
I don't know about the Scott County numbers, if we ever saw what happened there. That one's still up in the air. I did hear a report that Dixon's looking pretty good. Jonathan Dixon out in Henderson, which was a race the Democrats put some hope in. And some of the other, we haven't talked about Richard White, who the Democrats thought had a chance of winning that district because Lewis County was removed from redistricting. This was an example of where redistricting didn't help a Republican incumbent. But it looks like Richard White, who had some health challenges in the last session, looks like he's been reelected, which again was a potential pickup. So it's 79, 80, somewhere in there looks like where the Republicans are going to pick up. Stephen Rudy told me last week that the over/under was about 79.5. So he might have nailed that.
Yeah, I think Bob Hellringer said on Kentucky Tonight, though, that could be 7 to 8 seat pickup for the GOP in the House.
I think we're going to have 82 before it's over. I mean, I didn't know about Susan Witten, and that's 3 new in Jefferson County alone, which is a big shot in the arm. With Craig Greenberg winning the mayor's race, we pick up 3 House seats. That's going to help us insulate us from any ramifications of being this Democratic island. Jason Nemes is probably leadership. You're going to have Ken Fleming, these 3 new freshmen, Kevin Bratcher. They'll be there to protect Louisville's flanks and even get us some help.
Yeah, that's a pretty good experienced Republican caucus there in Louisville.
And Bratcher told me that the Bratcher in Hardin County is related. It's a cousin, and he used to babysit him. So he's going to tutor him in Frankfurt.
And they probably came from Grayson or Butler counties originally.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, Bob mentioned the speaker in Nemes. A lot of credit goes to the Republicans for going out and recruiting some really good candidates this year. Not just taking advantage of redistricting and some of the issue environment. You had some good candidates. Candidate recruitment's really important. A lot of elections are won and lost by the filing deadline in January. And I also, if I can, I want to take a point of personal privilege. My the former attorney for the State Board of Elections, Katie Gabhart, who is running for an open, she got appointed to be judge in Scott County. She won tonight, and so congratulations, Katie. She beat some of this race has got some controversy because her opponent was married to the Commonwealth attorney and was going to have to recuse himself. Rob Johnson, who used to hold the seat, but Katie beat him, and I'm really proud of Katie. She was the executive branch ethics commission director for a long time after leaving the state board, and she did a great job for the state board. So.
A little shout out there.
You know, we came into the evening, Renee, with half the House being decided, no contest in the November election. So that's quite a circumstance. Nemus and others who are recruiting for Republicans and Democrats who are recruiting need to think about that for 2 years from now.
Yeah, a lot to still think about, a lot to be talked about still. We'll have an update, of course, on Kentucky Edition tomorrow night at 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central. Of course, Bill Bryant and a team of journalists will be here Friday night at 8 Eastern, 7 Central to wrap it all up on Comment on Kentucky. Thank you so very much for being with us this evening. You can watch those speeches online tomorrow at KET.org. Have a good evening.